My whole career I was pretty much bald, so people just got to know me as being a bald guy. I did wonder what it would be like if I could have hair.
When you have different camera angles.
I recognize myself for the purpose of making an opening statement. Good morning. Today we begin the first hearing on the Oversight Subcommittee on DOGE. This committee will be laser focused on bringing full transparency to waste, fraud, and abuse within the federal government and presenting the plans to fix the tremendous problems we expose. We as a country are $36 trillion in debt. That is such a stunning amount of money. It's absolutely staggering to even comprehend how we as a people, we as a country, found ourselves here. This is not a Democrat problem. This is not a Republican problem. This is an American problem. To make it clear for everyone, not only are we $36 trillion in debt, but the compounding interest on our debt is also growing out of control. Even if we decided to defund the entire federal government, we cannot escape our debt and the compounding interest owed on our debt, which grows bigger and bigger every year. In 2025, interest payments are projected to be $952 billion, which is more than our entire military budget. In 2026, it will be $1 trillion, and by 2035, $1.8 trillion. Over the next decade, total interest payments are projected to be $13.8 trillion. These interest payments don't serve a single American. They don't build a bridge, a road, provide disaster relief, or fund a single part of the behemoth that is the federal government. These interest payments pay our masters who own our debt, and the American people are in debt slavery to everyone who owns our debt. Our crippling national debt and massively growing interest on our debt will destroy us. Not destroy one political party or the other, it will destroy all of us together. It drives inflation, making life unaffordable for Americans struggling to financially survive. It is crippling small businesses struggling to be successful. Our massively growing debt and interest are the chains and shackles harnessed to every American and their children and every generation to come. But first, let us be brutally honest about how this massive debt came to be in the first place. It came from Congress and from elected presidential administrations. And I believe enslaving our nation in debt is one of the biggest betrayals against the American people by its own elected government. The American people's anger over this betrayal is what gave birth to the concept of DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. In fact, DOGE became a major part of President Trump's campaign and led to his overwhelming victory in November. Every day, Americans go to work. They run businesses. They have to earn their paycheck. No one guarantees it. And if they don't do a good job, they get fired. They also have to pay their bills, credit card debts, balance their checkbooks, and scrap and save every penny they can in order to plan for that rainy day and hopefully retirement one day. Private businesses only survive on hard-earned income by serving their customers so well that their customers pay them for the services and products they consume. If that business fails, its employees lose their jobs and paychecks, and the owners lose their business and everything they risked along with it. Many go bankrupt in this process and lose everything. No one bails them out. They only survive by excellent customer service and smart financial management. This is the real world that most Americans live, work, and survive in every day. This is the pursuit of happiness, and this is how you pursue the American dream. However, the federal government, government employees, and unelected bureaucrats do not live by the same rules as the great American people and private businesses. The federal government's income is the American people's hard-earned tax dollars, their literal blood, sweat, and tears. And taxes are collected by law at gunpoint. Don't pay your taxes and you go to jail. The federal government does not have to provide excellent customer service to earn its income. It takes your money whether you like it or not. And federal employees receive their paycheck no matter what. Whether veterans receive their benefits or not, whether your mail shows up or not, and whether your tax dollars are used to help Americans in need or are sent to foreign countries, for foreign people, for foreign causes. No matter how bad the federal government fails the American people, it still takes your money. It still pays its own federal employees, and it never, ever goes out of business. There are no consequences for bad customer service, total failure, and for enslaving the American people against their will in the ever-growing and future all-consuming national debt. Congress has a dismal approval rating that ranges between 12 and 20%. I don't blame the American people one bit for their sentiment and disgust. The American people will be watching this committee and how we tackle one of the biggest problems of our time. While we are a committee made up of the opposite far-reaching corners of Congress, we were each elected to serve and represent the American people and how their hard-earned tax dollars are spent. We as Republicans and Democrats can still hold tightly to our beliefs, but we are going to have to let go of funding them in order to save our sinking ship. This is not a time for political theater and partisan attacks. The American people are watching. The legislative branch can't sit on the sidelines. In this subcommittee, we will fight the war on waste shoulder to shoulder with President Trump, Elon Musk, and the DOGE team. This week, we turn our attention to improper payments by the federal government, including in Medicaid and Medicare. I'm looking forward to what we find out and how to solve this crisis. I now yield to the ranking member, Ms. Stansbury, for her opening statement.
Once you try a comfort hoodie, you can't go back to regular hoodies. They're slightly weighted, super oversized. It's that perfect fit that makes you...
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome to the very first subcommittee on government efficiency. As was said, this committee is tasked under the Oversight Committee with ensuring that the government and the vital services that it provides, from healthcare to national security, actually work for the American people. And this is certainly a topic that we have worked on for many, many years here in the Oversight Committee, in which I personally have worked on as a former civil servant who worked at the Office of Management and Budget. And in fact, for anyone who has ever worked on these issues, you know that there is ample ground for bipartisan work to make the government work better for the American people and to ensure that it operates in a more efficient manner. And in fact, all of us here on the Democratic side are ready to roll up our sleeves and to get to work. And just last week, I had the opportunity to sit down with the chairwoman and to discuss these very issues and opportunities to work across the aisle. And like the chairwoman who shared some of her background with me, I grew up in a working family. I grew up working for small mom and pop family businesses and understand the necessity of balancing the books, making sure we can deliver, and fiscal responsibility. And that's why today's hearing is focused on making sure that the federal government is doing what it's supposed to and digging into the more than $236 billion in improper payments that we see going out the door every single year. And we need to get to the bottom of that. And we need to make sure that we're putting into place rigorous oversight and controls to prevent fraud and abuse, and of course, to go after bad actors. And that is why myself and the Oversight Ranking Member Connolly and other Democratic members of the committee sent a set of bipartisan ideas that we'd like to work on together that would root out waste, fraud, and abuse and modernize and streamline how our agencies deliver vital programs for the American people. These are programs that are important for our seniors and our families and healthcare and the education system, and we need bipartisan solutions to get across the finish line. And we've been trying over the last several years to get these ideas out of this committee, but unfortunately, the committee's priorities have been elsewhere under the current majority. So I hope we can fix that this Congress. But we can't just sit here today and pretend like everything is normal and that this is just another hearing on government efficiency. I mean, all you have to do is look across this room and see that it is not a normal hearing. Because while we're sitting here, Donald Trump and Elon Musk are recklessly and illegally dismantling the federal government, shuttering federal agencies, firing federal workers, withholding funds vital to the safety and well-being of our communities, and hacking our sensitive data systems. In fact, while we were here discussing government waste on the House floor yesterday, Elon Musk was standing behind the Resolute desk in the Oval Office with the president, and the administration was making emergency court appeals to try to unlock his team's access to the Treasury payment system, which they claim they are using to study improper payments, which is the topic of this hearing. But here's the thing. The Treasury payment system, which includes Social Security information and bank accounts for millions of Americans and data that's critical to national security and the operation of the U.S. government, and payments that go out the door annually equal to almost a fifth of the U.S. economy, is not where the payment decisions are made, because that happens inside the agencies that are currently being dismantled. And the people who actually investigate waste, fraud, and abuse at these agencies are the inspector generals, who Donald Trump fired his first week in office in a midnight massacre. So we have to ask ourselves, what is really going on here? Why did Republicans block Elon Musk from appearing before this very committee last week? Why is the administration so eager to allow Elon Musk and his hackers to have access to proprietary and private information in the Treasury payment systems? Why are our colleagues across the aisle shielding them as they are clearly breaking the law? And why is the vice president trying to rewrite the U.S. Constitution by tweet and undermine the judiciary? So obviously, we're in the Oversight Committee and we have a lot of questions, and so do the American people. Especially while our colleagues across the aisle are trying to scoop up the savings from the dismantling of these agencies to pay for the largest permanent tax break in American history for billionaires and the folks that they're helping on their side of the aisle. So let me close by saying this directly to Mr. Elon Musk. We are well aware that you are eager to engage with members of Congress on social media, but we're not here to play. If you have serious desire to engage in democracy and transparency, we welcome you to the Oversight Committee. Come and testify in front of the American people under oath, because we want to know what you're up to. So if you're interested in talking to us, then please join us here in the People's House in the House of Representatives. And with that, I yield back.
The gentlelady yields. President Trump signed an executive order on his first day in office called Establishing and Implementing the President's Department of Government Efficiency. The EO simply renamed an office in the White House that was actually established by President Obama in 2014 called the U.S. Digital Service. President Trump can have Elon Musk into his Oval Office anytime he likes. I now recognize the chairman of the Oversight Committee, Chairman James Comer.
Well, thank you, Chairwoman Green, for holding today's hearing to launch a war on waste. President Trump won an electoral landslide with a clear mandate from the American people to eliminate Washington waste and stop the theft of American tax dollars. And he is delivering on his promise. President Trump has empowered Elon Musk and DOGE to conduct a government-wide audit to identify solutions to curb waste and protect tax dollars. That's exactly what the mission of this committee is supposed to be, and I'm glad that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have found a newfound interest in waste, fraud, and abuse. With a staggering $37 trillion in national debt, we have no time to lose. A key place to start is improper payments. Since 2003, the government has lost $2.7 trillion because of improper payments. Fraudsters, organized criminals, hostile foreign actors, and even government employees have siphoned money away from those who truly qualify for assistance. For years, Republicans and Democrats in the Oversight Committee have condemned this waste. But now that DOGE is taking real action, Democrats are choosing to defend the bureaucracy and status quo instead of standing up for the American people. I want to thank Chairwoman Green for holding this very important hearing, not only to expose the problems, but to find solutions. We stand with President Trump and DOGE in the fight to end waste, fraud, and abuse in Washington. With that, I yield back to Subcommittee Chairwoman Green, and congratulations again, Chairwoman, on holding this first hearing of the DOGE Subcommittee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The gentleman yields back. I now recognize the ranking member on oversight, Mr. Connolly.
Excuse me. Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for having this first hearing on DOGE. Improper payments is not a new subject. I remember joining Steve Lynch and then Todd Platts, Republican member from Pennsylvania, in my freshman year, talking about improper payments. At that time, improper payments were in the range of $35 billion a year. They're now in the range of $280 billion a year, and times 10, we could cut almost $3 trillion from the debt if we addressed improper payments in a deliberative way, which GAO has called for in the high-risk category for years. We can also, secondly, enforce the tax code. It's estimated that at least $500 billion a year is left on the table uncollected but owed because of lack of resources in the IRS. Again, times 10 is $5 trillion over a decade. And finally, we can modernize federal IT systems, which we've championed for years on this committee. We know that legacy systems alone could save hundreds of millions of dollars a year in operating and maintenance costs. So if we want to be serious about it, let's be serious about it. But the way not to do it is to fire the people charged with the remit of waste, fraud, and abuse, namely inspectors general. President Trump has already now fired 19, including most recently the USAID Inspector General, who dared to warn that we could lose $500 million of food aid because it's in warehouses not being moved because of the funding freeze that was imposed in AID. That's a cost we need to avoid. And for doing his job, that IG was fired. If we want to be serious, we've got to have objective, neutral inspectors general who are monitoring government waste, fraud, and abuse and expenditures. And I think you would find Democrats more than willing partners in that kind of enterprise if we're going to be serious. But a wrecking crew, a wrecking crane, a wrecking ball is not going to do it, and we're not going to support that approach to waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal government. I yield back. Thank you.
The gentleman yields. The President of the United States has the prerogative to fire anyone that has overseen $36 trillion in debt, enslaving the American people, and rightfully so. I'm pleased to welcome today's expert panel of witnesses who each bring unique experience and expertise that will be valuable to today's discussion. I'd first like to welcome Mr. Haywood Talcove, the Chief Executive Officer for Government at LexisNexis Risk Solutions, Inc. His commitment to customers' needs allows LexisNexis to develop market-leading solutions that have enabled customers to stop fraud, waste, and abuse. Next, we have Mr. Stuart Whitson, the Senior Director of Federal Affairs at the Foundation of Government Accountability. Stuart was previously a special agent in the FBI, a U.S. Army veteran, and now spends his time at FGA advocating to improve welfare, the workforce, and other policy. Next, we have Ms. Dawn Royal, a certified welfare fraud investigator in the state of Wyoming and director for the United Council of Welfare Fraud. She advocates for investigating and preventing fraud of government benefits and has done so over the past 16 years. Finally, we have Mr. Dylan Hetler-Goddett, the Director of Government Affairs at the Project on Government Oversight. Dylan leads advocacy efforts and policy reforms to a wide range of good governance. I thank each of our witnesses for being here today, and I look forward to your testimony. Pursuant to Committee Rule 9G, the witnesses will please stand and raise their right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record show that the witnesses answered in the affirmative. Thank you. You may take a seat. We appreciate you being here today and look forward to your testimony. Let me remind the witnesses that we have read your written statement and it will appear in full in the hearing record. Please limit your oral statement to 5 minutes. As a reminder, please press the button on the microphone in front of you so that it is on and the members can hear you. When you begin to speak, the light in front of you will turn green. After 4 minutes, the light will turn yellow. When the red light comes on, your 5 minutes have expired, and we would ask that you please wrap up. I now recognize Mr. Talcove for his opening statement.
Chairwoman Green, Ranking Member Stansberry, and distinguished members of the committee. For over a decade, a silent war has been waged against American taxpayers, not with bombs or guns, but with data and technology. Outdated government systems.
Sleep can change everything. It can turn you into the morning workout person you used to hate. Sleep can give you the energy.
Permit criminals to access unlimited sums of money. During the pandemic, they stole $1 trillion. 70% of those dollars went overseas. Shockingly, it's just not criminals exploiting the system, it's the flawed system itself acting as the accomplice. If left unchecked, the U.S. government will continue to lead the world in funding cyber criminals. This is a data and technology problem, and it demands a data-driven response. Criminal syndicates have turned benefit programs into their personal ATM machines, exploiting those in need who wait months for benefits that may never come. These ruthless crooks use our money to fund child trafficking, disperse drugs in our communities, and terrorism. For years, criminal networks have stolen personal information from the public and private sector. They exploit real identities to manipulate antiquated government systems, siphoning off billions in taxpayers' hard-earned money. We continue to pay benefits to deceased and incarcerated individuals, direct money to bad actors flagged on the Do Not Pay list, and overlook duplicate Social Security numbers by not following best practices. During the pandemic, a simple cross-check of PPP loan recipients against IRS records would have exposed massive fraud and prevented payments to transnational criminals who sold their quote-unquote sauce on the dark web. To stop this, we must reclaim control of our systems, not just from the criminal syndicates, but the flawed systems enabling them. Smarter technology, data, and identity verification are not optional. They are necessities to protect taxpayers and ensure aid reaches those who truly need it. Now, the use of AI is fundamentally changing society, but in the hands of criminals, it has become a weapon. Lawbreakers are now using it to supercharge their war on taxpayers. They use AI to create fake identity documents that pass biometric verifications. Bots flood portals with thousands of fraudulent claims per second, and deep fakes that mimic real applicants bypass the outdated NIST 863 standards from 2017. Honest and deserving people seeking access to government benefits suffer through endless application forms that are nearly impossible to navigate. But criminals from Russia, China, and Romania gain access with ease. The private sector has fraud rates below 3%. Meanwhile, the public sector operates at a 20% fraud rate. The solution is clear. It's already used every day to protect consumers. You seamlessly interact with your bank through an app that verifies your identity in milliseconds. There's no excuse for the government to lag if we do the following. Number one, implement identity verification on the front end. Criminals should never receive a dime. Eliminate self-certification. No more honor system for billion-dollar programs. And continuous auditing. Keep verifying because criminals never stop adapting. Pay and chase does not work. Of the $250 billion stolen in pandemic unemployment fraud, less than $5 billion has been recovered. The idea in government that you cannot have speed and security is fiction. I urge Congress to consider making the following legislative changes. Number one, update the 1974 Privacy Act to allow for data sharing and matching. Number two, fund a budget for fraud prevention in each appropriation bill. The USDA spends 1/20 of 1% on fraud prevention. Mandate that individuals caught stealing from entitlement programs pay hefty fines and are removed from the program permanently. And finally, eliminate broad-based categorical eligibility. This committee has a choice: continue losing this war against criminal cartels and nation states, or fight back and save $1 trillion annually. Fraud prevention is not benefit prevention. It's the key to ensuring that every dollar reaches those who truly need it. Hardworking Americans rely on these programs not just to survive, but to build better lives for their families. When criminals exploit the system, they just don't steal money, they steal opportunities. Stopping fraud isn't about denying benefits, it's about protecting them. This crime has two victims. The first are the taxpayers, and the second are those seeking benefits. The fraudsters, cartels, and criminal syndicates are watching this hearing, I'm sure of it. It's time to show them that America will not fund its own destruction. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Talco. I now recognize Ms. Royal for her opening statement.
Good morning, Chairwoman Green, Ranking Member Stansberry, and committee members. My name is Dawn Royal. I'm a certified welfare fraud investigator, 2-term past president, and a current director of the United Council on Welfare Fraud. The United Council on Welfare Fraud is a national professional organization dedicated to protecting the integrity in our nation's public assistance programs. We are the only national organization singularly focused on the detection, prevention, and prosecution of welfare fraud. For too long, agency bureaucrats have pitted citizens' access to welfare programs against the integrity of those programs. Access versus integrity should never be an either-or dichotomy. We can all agree that access to public assistance is crucial. America's citizens should not be hungry or deprived of medical care because of their inability to pay. However, making sure vulnerable citizens have access to these welfare programs should not mean that we simply turn a blind eye to integrity. We do not pursue the prevention, detection, and prosecution of if we do not pursue the prevention, detection, and prosecution of fraud, taxpayers become the victims as the welfare programs become slush funds for anyone wanting to supplement their income with SNAP benefits, absolve themselves from the financial responsibility of medical bills, and using Medicaid to further taxpayer exploitation by taking advantage of cash assistance, energy assistance, child care, and other social welfare programs. One example of a welfare fraud is a case that I investigated that was criminally prosecuted last year. The applicant mother failed to disclose her children's father as well as his employment and income on multiple applications she submitted for Medicaid, SNAP, and low-income energy assistance. The co-defendant father worked a steady job, earning a six-figure salary, and provided an enviable lifestyle for his family, including vacations, luxury vehicles, snowmobiles, motorhomes, lavish gifts, including one from the wife to the husband, which was a $1,200 bottle of bourbon. Evidence we presented at trial included a candidate registration forms filed by the defendant father when he ran for town council and later mayor of the town where he declared he lived at the same address provided by his wife on her public assistance programs. This was a case of greed, but it emphasizes how easy it was for these criminals to make false statements on applications in order to receive benefits from multiple programs that they were never eligible for.
I am about to completely transform my house with a futuristic lighting system called Jellyfish Lights.
I could spend the rest of my day providing countless examples of how taxpayer-funded programs are exploited, and the message would be the same. Investigators continue to be hamstrung by antiquated regulations, conflicting directives from federal agencies, and the lack of access to technology. Sadly, investigators have also found themselves at odds with the career bureaucrats who recite watered-down facts about fraud in order to promote their political agendas. Specifically, we can look to the career bureaucrats who have historically claimed that the fraud rate in SNAP is less than 1%. The disregard for the value of integrity is evidenced by the less than 1/20th of 1% of the SNAP budget spent on the prevention, detection, and prosecution of fraud. As part of Medicaid unwinding debacle, the bureaucrats specifically directed states that they, and I quote, cannot recover or recoup the cost of services from a beneficiary, even if they have been found after an administrative hearing or criminal proceeding to have committed Medicaid beneficiary fraud or abuse, end quote. Sadly, it is already apparent that career bureaucrats are not being totally transparent as they attempt to protect spending and broken programs. We fail to understand how mitigating the rampant fraud in Medicaid, SNAP, and other welfare programs stands up or strengthens the welfare programs. Fact is, the opposite is true. Ignoring fraud and gaslighting fraud statistics erodes the very foundations of the programs that are essential to their future viability. There are things this committee can do to help the investigators fighting the war on fraud. Number one, eliminate self-attestation in the application process for all programs. Number two, funding for technology that includes identity verification tools that will help prevent fraud. The current pay and chase model is not sustainable. Number three, immediately implement the National Accuracy Clearinghouse, the NAC, that will provide data to states to prevent duplicate participation in all of the social welfare programs. And four, allocate direct funding with mandates restricting the use of the funding to the prevention, detection, and prosecution of fraud. In closing, we're at a crossroads. Those of us who have firsthand knowledge of the degree in which public welfare programs are being attacked know that reform is absolutely necessary. Reform to the recipient application process, the billing process in Medicaid, and how SNAP benefits are processed, and how providers and retailers are authorized. We thank you for the opportunity for UCOF to participate in this hearing. We feel that the investigators who are on the front lines fighting the daily battle against the war on fraud need to be at the table and participating in the development of action plans that will make a difference in protecting the programs and defending the taxpayers.
Thank you, Ms. Royal. I now recognize Mr. Whitson for his opening statement.
Chairwoman Green, Ranking Member Stansbury, members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. On the campaign trail, President Trump promised to take on the bloated bureaucracy in D.C., rebuild trust in the DOJ and the FBI, crack down on waste, fraud, and abuse, and restore common sense. And on day one, he started delivering on those promises with a wave of executive orders and the official launch of DOGE, which he, of course, tasked Elon Musk to lead. Already, DOGE efforts have brought to the public's attention countless examples of wasteful spending, including $59 million paid to luxury hotels in New York to house illegal immigrants, $1.5 million to advance DEI in Serbia's workplaces, $32,000 for a transgender comic book in Peru. The list goes on. But rather than applauding the work of DOGE, the left has launched a coordinated campaign to try to demonize Mr. Musk with the hope of shifting focus away from the disastrous waste, fraud, and abuse that occurred on Biden's watch. But guess what? It's not working. Because no matter what political party people hail from, the vast majority of Americans agree that $10 million worth of food funneled to Al-Qaeda was probably not the best use of taxpayer money. But there's another source, a key source of wasteful spending that DOGE and the subcommittee should set their sights on next, and that's Medicaid waste and fraud. While initially meant as a program for the truly needy, Medicaid is bloated into a massive welfare program for millions of able-bodied adults lured into the trap of government dependency. And as Medicaid has grown, so too has mismanagement. Today, more than $1 in $5 spent on Medicaid is improper. In Medicaid alone, fraud and mismanagement is on track to cost U.S. taxpayers, get this, more than $1 trillion over the next 10 years. When it comes to the problem of improper payments, the Medicaid program is the biggest culprit, encompassing nearly 1/3 of all federal improper payments. And more than 80% of Medicaid improper payments are due to one thing: eligibility errors. If Congress wants to help President Trump address wasteful spending, then targeting eligibility errors in Medicaid should be one of your top priorities.
Paying your bills on time raises your credit score, right? Wrong. In fact, this is one of the 3 major credit score lies you're being told by the big credit companies. Fall for any of these 3, and it doesn't matter what you do. Getting to 720 and above will be a long, hard struggle if you ever get there at all. In fact, if you're one of the 153 million Americans with a credit score below 720, it's probably because you're unwillingly falling for one or more of these 3 deadly lies that the big credit companies want you to believe. Not only are these lies flat out wrong, and not only do they make it nearly impossible to get a great credit score, but in many cases, fail for them and they'll send your score spiraling in the wrong direction. Which is why right now, I'm going to expose 3 dangerous lies, tell you exactly what to do instead, and finally show you the proven, little known, and 100% legal trick that can raise your scores practically on command. And it's so easy and convenient, you can start using it as soon as today from the comfort of your own home to boost your credit scores in as little as 5 minutes. It doesn't even matter if your score is stuck in the 500s or below right now. This trick takes advantage of a little known loophole written directly into the consumer credit law, so it's legally guaranteed to work for you. Believe me when I say, implement this 5-minute trick and you'll find yourself soaring right through this secret loophole in the credit system, where you can watch in amazement as your scores go to the moon in as little as days. So please, stop whatever you're doing and go watch the special video I put together for you at the Watch Now button you see on your screen right now. Listen, by now, you've already seen all the different scandals in the banking and credit industry on the news. It's clear that this twisted system takes advantage of good people. This is what inspired.
Bottom line, to address this challenge, Congress can take 3 decisive actions. So first, Congress can strengthen the Medicaid program through legislative action. That would include repealing Biden's disastrous Medicaid streamlining rule, which ties the hands of states trying to remove ineligible enrollees. You can and should do this through reconciliation, and it will produce $164 billion in savings if you do. You can also strengthen verification requirements to ensure only eligible individuals receive benefits and ensure a nationwide NAC is implemented without delay. Second thing Congress can do is help President Trump's DOGE effort by ensuring that entrenched partisan bureaucrats don't stand in the way of reform. So Musk and his DOGE team have already found hundreds of billions of dollars funneled into wasteful, fraudulent, and flat-out insane projects. But they've only scratched the surface. If this much fraud has been exposed in just a few weeks, imagine what else is buried under layers of red tape and government excuses. But guess what? All of these insane projects have one thing in common. They were all approved and funded by unelected bureaucrats. And these and other entrenched bureaucrats are already pledging to fight against President Trump's efforts to improve government accountability and efficiency. Personnel is policy, and without competent staff to faithfully execute the president's agenda, the DOGE project will fail. And this is where Congress can help. Congress can support the president in carrying out his DOGE effort by making all executive branch employees at will, codifying the president's authority to fire unproductive or insubordinate agency employees as needed. At the same time, Congress can grant the president authority to permanently eliminate vacant positions and consolidate non-essential positions across agencies and departments to help promote efficiency and put the right people in the right seat. The third thing, Congress can make President Trump's DOGE cost-cutting and deregulatory reforms permanent by passing the REINS Act. And so there's only one big problem with the DOGE effort. Most of its work can be undone by a future president with a stroke of a pen. To make President Trump's DOGE reforms permanent, Congress must act. And the best way to do this is to pass the REINS Act. This would return Article 1 budgetary power of the purse to Congress while promoting deregulation. It would also help lock in the DOGE reforms and cement President Trump's legacy as the most consequential deregulatory and cost-cutting president in U.S. history. The American people are watching. It's time for Congress to act. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Whitson. I now recognize Mr. Hetler Goddett for his opening statement.
Thank you, Chairwoman Green, Ranking Member Stansberry, and members of the subcommittee. My name is Dylan Hetler Goddett, and I am the Director of Government Affairs at the Project on Government Oversight, or POGO. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you here today to talk about the critical issue of bringing more accountability and transparency to federal spending, including rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse. Since our founding in 1981, POGO has been focused on promoting more accountability and rooting out wasteful spending and promoting efficiency, especially at the Department of Defense. We have a long and well-established track record on these issues, and we take a back when it comes to promoting a better and more effective government, which necessarily includes a federal government that is a good and responsible steward of taxpayer dollars. Let's take a moment to pause here to talk a little bit about terms that we're going to hear a lot today and the differences between them. Waste is different from fraud. Fraud is different from abuse, and abuse is different from both. When we talk about improper payments, they are a subset of those other three categories. But that doesn't tell us the whole picture either. Sometimes improper payments are a function of bad record keeping. Sometimes they are a function of outdated information technology systems. Sometimes they come about through human error, and sometimes they come about through negligence. There are a variety of reasons why improper payments happen. It just simply is not the case that improper payments are only a function of bad people doing bad things with bad intent. That doesn't mean we shouldn't focus on trying to mitigate improper payments, and that certainly doesn't mean that the American people should not be concerned with how their tax dollars are used. The good news is that there are some time-tested solutions and tools to help mitigate these problems. For example, when we think about the independence of inspectors general, we're talking about a resource that is extraordinarily valuable to the American people. In fiscal year 2023 alone, inspectors general identified over $93 billion worth of potential savings to taxpayers. Whistleblowers are also an incredible resource to the American taxpayer. Through the IRS's whistleblower program alone, billions of dollars have been recouped from tax cheats since the inception of that program in 2007. Whistleblowers have also played an instrumental role in helping the Department of Justice pursue False Claims Act cases that have resulted in billions of dollars in reclaimed settlement costs.
Hey, Robert Hertzberg from Shark Tank. I'm a huge fan. Hey, what is your number one tip for saving money?
Easy. Pay off your credit card debt as soon as possible. And there's actually a way to do that without paying the full amount.
What if I can't afford to pay more every month?
You actually don't have to pay more. In fact, your monthly payments go down, and they can go down as much as 40%.
So monthly payments go down, total debt goes down, and I can be out of debt that fast. So what do I need to do?
Thousands of people have done this. It's insane how well it works. Have you seen the video I've made? It explains everything.
My name's Robert Hertzberg, and you probably know me from the hit show Shark Tank, where my job is to help people grow their small business. But this video is about helping people do something even more important: get out of debt. It's called the Debt Clear USA program, and it is amazing. The Debt Clear USA program uses a team of top negotiators. Here's how it works. The Debt Clear USA team discovered that by working with people with $7,500 or more in debt, they could negotiate much better deals by cutting through the red tape and talking directly with these banks to get people the savings they deserve. Currently, the Debt Clear USA team is achieving an average of 45% aggregate discount on debts. Imagine that. 45% of your total debt erased. And some are higher, as high as 50% off. That's right, up to half of your debt vanishing just through this negotiating team. Not only that, the Debt Clear USA program actually lowers your monthly payment, and here's the best part, no more interest. That's right, the interest stops completely. This team has over 10 years of experience negotiating with every bank and loan company you can imagine. They've helped over 300,000 people get out of debt. They have a 4.9 star rating on Trustpilot on over 15,000 reviews, and an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau, which is really important to me. So if you want to see if you qualify and have the Debt Clear USA negotiators fight for you, just click the Learn More button below and we'll get started. Next, you'll answer a few questions with your name, how much debt you have, and a phone number that your Debt Clear USA specialist can contact you at. And you will never pay a dime in fees. You're going to want to keep doing this again and again until all your debts are gone. So if you're ready to join thousands of other people who've eliminated their debt, don't wait 1 second longer. Click the Learn More button below and let's get started erasing your debts for good. These banks are not in control. You are.
One of the great challenges in this world is knowing enough about a subject to think you're right, but not enough about the subject to know you're wrong. There's like a gazillion hours of me on the internet. In almost every case, I'm talking about the universe, black holes, the Big Bang, time travel, God. But what I'm gonna do in this masterclass is teach you how to think. The goal here is to train your mind how to see the world differently, how to question what others say. I've come to realize that there are 3 categories of truth: personal truth, political truths, and the objective truths that shape our understanding of the universe. The interesting thing about an objective truth is that it's true no matter what. Imagine that. By the time we're done, you will be equipped with some of the methods and tools so you can turn data into information, information into knowledge, knowledge into wisdom.
It seemed to me that if an administration were serious about wanting to root out waste, fraud, and abuse, they would support and resource whistleblowers and inspectors general. They would not demonize them, and they would certainly not fire them en masse in an unlawful midnight purge. There are other reforms we can think about too, reforms that are more technical, but just as important. Key statutes such as the Federal Funding Accountability and Transparency Act, the Data Act, and critical platforms like usaspending.gov were really important improvements and innovations when they came about, but they are in need of overhaul and reform. Currently, the status quo is that we have an extraordinarily hard time tracking federal dollars from end to end. This is due in large part to a broken chain of data collection, of reporting information, and the ability to monitor and track in real time what is happening with federal dollars. This informational black hole is where a lot of impropriety happens. It's where waste, fraud, and abuse live. And yes, this is where improper payments often happen. But more importantly, we also don't have a good, clear, and consistent way of understanding what is happening with tax dollars at the end point. What is the impact that we're having? What is the return on investment that we're having? We now have an annual budget of close to $7 trillion a year. We can't say with any degree of clarity and consistency what we're getting for all of that money. We have some more good news, though. There are bipartisan efforts, and there have been for years, to try and clean up this situation. We at POGO have had the privilege and pleasure of working on some of those initiatives. We were a part of the Federal Taxpayers' Right to Know Act being passed into law just a couple of years ago, which created for the very first time a program inventory of all the programs in the federal government, and that would be available to the public. We have worked with a member of this very committee, the House Oversight and Accountability Committee, to introduce a piece of legislation that would bring more transparency to federal subaward reporting. We have supported and endorsed multiple pieces of legislation that take direct aim at the improper payments issue. We also have additional ideas that don't yet have congressional champions One proposal is to clean up and modernize and standardize the award descriptions that are available in USA Spending to make them more useful and relevant. We have another proposal to harmonize the amount of data and information we collect between contract spending and non-contract spending. We stand ready, willing, and able to work with anybody who wants to work with us on these common sense solutions. Lastly, I want to put in a quick word for Congress.
Yeah.
And specifically, I want to...
The gentleman's time is expired.
Apologies.
Yes.
I can't see the flashing light.
That's okay. Thank you, Mr. Hetler. Got it. We appreciate your testimony. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questions. I'd like to thank our witnesses today for your testimonies and the suggestions that you have brought before this committee. I'd also like to thank Chairman Comer for this opportunity to chair the Historic Oversight Subcommittee on DOGE. Americans are shocked to learn that $2.7 trillion of their hard-earned tax dollars have been stolen or wasted in improper payments since 2003. You see, in the private sector, companies can't continue to run if they keep employees that allow waste and abuse with their resources. But that has continued for decades here in the federal government. Mr. Talcove, do private sector companies have a lower rate of improper payments than the federal government?
Yes, the fraud rate that the criminals are taking advantage of in the public sector is around 20%. In the private sector, it's around 3%, and it's really because the tools that are used in the private sector aren't used in the public sector. Front-end identity verification, self-certification, and then finally making sure that individuals are who they say they are. If we start using these tools, you will see the fraud rate go down dramatically, because for the most part, this fraud isn't taking place by real individuals. It's individuals whose identities have been stolen on the dark web. They use that information pretending to be somebody else, and because of the antiquated systems, processes, and technologies in place in government programs, they're able to steal at scale.
Right. So, Mr. Talcove, we would say that private companies that pretty much have to exist on a 20% profit rate, they are not allowed. They can't continue to be successful if they were to allow their customers' data to be stolen like that and used by criminals. However, the federal government, who can continue printing checks and continue in operation, never fixes its problems because it can't be forced to go out of business. Would you agree with that? Yes or no?
Yes. One of the things I noticed during COVID was the criminals learned that government was the mark because it never runs out of money. And they focus on it at scale, and then the likelihood of getting caught is virtually zero.
I think it's outrageous for Americans to know that their identity can be stolen and then used for child trafficking, drug trafficking, and terrorism, like you stated in your opening statement. Ms. Royal, your testimony states that many programs operate under essentially an honor system in which applicants need not verify their identity, income, residency, or other key eligibility factors. You call this a trust everyone instead of a trust by verify approach. Does this mean the federal government in some states are giving out billions of dollars to individuals without verifying who they are or whether they meet program eligibility requirements?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
That's outrageous. Do states have enough incentive to prevent fraud and to recover improper payments?
No, and in fact, states are hesitant to spend their state dollars to protect federal dollars.
Would greater investment in program integrity efforts yield a positive return for taxpayers?
Yes, it could easily be self-funding.
Amazing. Mr. Whitson, your testimony states that both the Biden and Obama administrations issued rules and guidance that made it harder for states to verify eligibility for Medicaid. You say that repealing Biden's Medicaid streamlining rule would save $164 billion over 10 years because the rule restricts eligibility verification that states can perform. Can you explain why this rule is so costly?
Yeah, so the rule does a number of things, but for instance, it prohibits states from verifying eligibility more than once a year. So for non-disabled folks to just go in and look and say, hey, are you still eligible for the program? It says you are forbidden from doing that any more often than once a year. And so obviously people's lives change, and so they may become ineligible, and so it's designed to keep them on the program. Another thing, it prohibits in-person or phone interviews to verify their identity. So people apply for it.
If your matching set doesn't make you this excited, then you just haven't tried a Comfort set yet. Comfort is a mental health supporting brand that makes all of their clothing with a slightly weighted, slightly oversized material and a buttery, soft fabric that truly feels like a cloud on your skin. It is something you will never want to take off, and once you try it, you'll understand the hype. Their sets are unlike any others too, because they have these hoodies that actually hoodie. They're not restricting around the neck, they don't make you look like an egghead, and they're actually flattering on. Plus, the matching pants will literally snatch you in with a thick but stretchy waistband. They truly look so good on everyone. And the pockets on all of their sets are so deep. They have these kangaroo pouches that are just unmatched. For sizing reference, I'm 5'3" and I got a size medium in the color bone from their signature collection, but there are so many different colors and collections you can choose from. They do tend to sell out fast though, so if you want to get your hands on them, run to get one before it's gone.
Introducing the FilterSorb Whole House Water Conditioner, a complete home water filtration and conditioning system by Pure Again Water. Calcium and magnesium are healthy minerals found in your home's water supply. However, when these ions are heated, they can wreak havoc on your home, causing hard water and scale buildup in your pipes and appliances. In the past, traditional salt-based water softeners have been used to soften water. However, these systems require a lot of maintenance, waste thousands of gallons of water, and the sodium can damage your home over time. This is why we've created a salt-free system that requires no bulky tank, uses no electricity, and wastes no water, while providing clean, conditioned, great-tasting water throughout your home. Here's how it works. When water enters the system, it will travel through 2 carbon block filters, which will remove up to 99% of chlorine from the water, as well as any other harmful contaminants. After the water is purified, it then enters the 3rd stage, which contains the FilterSorb SP3 media, where it undergoes a process called nucleation-assisted crystallization. As the water passes through the FilterSorb media, calcium and magnesium is transformed into harmless nanocrystals on the surface of the FilterSorb SP3 beads. Once these crystals are formed, they are very stable and unable to form scale. As these crystals flow through your water system, they will begin removing any existing scale buildup, unblocking even the toughest hard water scale from your pipes and appliances. Furthermore, because our system is neutralizing the hard mineral ions instead of removing them, it will provide you and your family with the cleanest, purest, and most delicious mineral water you've ever tasted. Most importantly, when you purchase the FilterSorb Whole House system, you will also receive lifetime servicing at no additional cost, which guarantees that your system will always be working at peak performance, and you will never pay for a service call for as long as you own the system. For more information or to schedule a free in-home consultation, contact Pure Again Water today and give your family the gift of clean, healthy, great-tasting water.
And then the person on the other end says, well, I just want to call and make sure this is a real person, not someone in another country or whatever. The rule prohibits that. And so there's a number of other provisions. It also opens a lengthy reconsideration periods. And this is where illegal immigrants are able to obtain the benefits. And so basically it says once you get these benefits, you can't interfere with it for a 90-day period or longer. And so there's a number of horrible things. But.
So we can't verify if someone is illegal or legal receiving benefits. Just to correct that, yes or no?
You have to wait a state has to wait at least 90 days. And actually what we're seeing is it's led some states to wait as long as 13 years And so on the part,
unbelievable. My time has expired. Thank you very much. I now recognize Mr. Lynch from Massachusetts for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. First of all, let me congratulate you and also Ms. Stansbury on your new positions. And I want to thank the witnesses for your testimony. We've already heard some good ideas about how to work together. And Mr. Hetler-Gaudette, I, for one, would be most open to working with POGO and trying to work on some of the legislative ideas that you have to actually get at some of this waste, fraud, and abuse. Since this is my first opportunity to speak in this new subcommittee as the representative for the 8th Congressional District in Massachusetts, I want to first of all make clear that my primary purpose in seeking appointment to this subcommittee is for the singular and sacred purpose to defend our democracy, which I believe is under attack in this country, and to uphold my oath to support and defend the Constitution against those who might secretly or openly seek its destruction. Make no mistake, this is a moment for representative democracy. This is a test of our resolve. In the coming days and weeks, we will all get to decide whether we stand with a couple of billionaires who, despite their own financial successes, still harbor such grievances in their hearts that after all that democracy has provided to them, they remain animated by the desire to dismantle this democratic government and to punch down at some of the weakest and most vulnerable in our society. Two men who clearly understand that the easiest way to incite large numbers of people is to use social media to exploit the dynamic forces of hatred and fear. Madam Chair, if we're going after waste, fraud, and abuse, let's start with abuse. Abuse of power. As of yesterday, there were 55 lawsuits under consideration by the federal courts across our nation as a result of Elon Musk's and President Trump's unlawful acts. Many of those lawsuits have already been sustained by the federal district courts and orders have been rendered to undo those unlawful acts. But this is just the beginning, and Congress has an important role to play, and I, for one, look forward to that opportunity. This is a moment of great consequence for our country and for our democracy, and I remain grateful to the good people of the 8th Congressional District of Massachusetts who sent me here. Mr. Hetler-Gaudette, again, happy to join you on some of your efforts. POGO has worked very closely with our IG community, is that right, the Inspector Generals?
Yeah, that's correct, Congressman.
I know your work is very much similar to what we ask our Inspectors Generals to undertake. I want to ask you, what do you think? So in the most recent report from the Inspector Generals, and this is the Council of the Inspector Generals, a nonpartisan group on integrity and efficiency in government, they identified more than $93 billion in potential savings. So the first thing that President Trump did coming into office was to fire 17 agency inspectors general. What can you tell us from POGO's standpoint? What does that do to our ability to identify and root out waste, fraud, and abuse?
My whole career I was pretty much bald, so people just got to know me as being a bald guy. I did wonder what it would be like if I could have hair.
When you have different camera angles and it's getting different parts of your head, all of a sudden now things start sticking out.
You're trying all the different hairstyles and trying to do all these things to try and hide it, but you really know that it's not really hiding it.
You start saying, man, I got a nice shaped head for a bald head, You know, that really looks good, but really you don't. You know, really you want hair.
I never thought there was an option for me not to be bald. Once I got my consultation at Restore, it was an easy decision to make.
Here at Restore, we've mastered a procedure that doesn't require a scalpel or stitches. It's safe and totally undetectable. It's the best method to regrow your own hair.
The Restore process was not painful whatsoever.
It's a simple process, relaxed the whole time.
Then in the morning, I was out in the afternoon.
I get different reactions every day. People can't believe that it's my hair. I feel better with hair, and I feel like I can pull off more looks.
Immediately after my procedure, I was right back in my normal life.
I feel good about how I look.
Restore!
Look at this old dude here. I'm Ryan Sandberg, and I chose Restore.
I can be in the barbershop, get whatever style I want. It just makes me feel so much better.
The rest of your life, you will have hair, and you'll be happy every day that you did it.
Restore is giving us an opportunity to present the best us.
And I kind of want to open the doors to let men know you can do this. You can talk about it to your friends. You can go get it done. Just an amazing experience for me. I owe it all to Restore.
The stock market is open for nearly 7 hours a day, but don't even think about trading it after. Hi, I'm David Kino, and I help ordinary people go after their retirement goals sooner by teaching them how to master the retirement trade. This is a special trade designed to be used every morning between 9 a.m. and... Why this window? Well, I can't share that info in this video, but you'll discover the exact reason why inside this free report. Just click the button or link on this video to download this valuable report for free. Click the link now. This video is ending in 5 seconds, so click it now.
Thank you, Congressman. I would say, to put it simply, it completely undermines our ability to root out waste, fraud, and abuse. Inspectors General exist for essentially one purpose, and they were originally created in the immediate aftermath of Watergate, and I think you all probably do not need me to give you a history lesson at all on what happened in the Watergate era. There's a reason they were created at that time, because there was a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse happening, and there were not cops on the beat that were internal, that were independent, that were situated in agencies to be able to find these things and expose them and do something about them. That's what Inspectors General exist to do. So it's completely anathema to, I'd say anathema to any stated mission to find cost savings and to root out waste, fraud, and abuse, to fire Inspector General and to undermine them. It makes no sense. Those two things do not add up.
Thank you very much. The firings that occurred on the when President Trump came to the office included the Special Inspector General for Afghan Reconstruction, Mr. Sopko. I actually did over 20 trips to Afghanistan working with him. He actually uncovered $4 billion in savings in rooting out American taxpayer waste being conducted in Afghanistan. The IG at the Department of Defense, the agency...
The gentleman's time has expired.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back. Thank you.
Okay,
Appreciate
thank you.
that. Thank you.
I now recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Cloud.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For far too long, D.C. politicians have gotten away with measuring their personal value and worth by how much of other people's money they give away. And for far too long, they self-righteously have opined that this spending was for altruistic purposes given out of care and compassion. For far too long, they've been more concerned with looking like they cared than having enough care and concern to actually do the due diligence to ensure that the tax dollars were being used wisely and effectively. And for far too long, those of us who've worked to uncover waste, fraud, and abuse have had to deal with what amounts to an unconstitutional fourth branch of permanent bureaucracy that has too often worked to ignore, obfuscate, delay, and frustrate our efforts to bring transparency and oversight. Over the last few weeks, the DOGE effort has begun to uncover not only how massive the waste, fraud, and abuse is, but also the extent at which D.C. politicians and too many obstinate bureaucrats have coordinated to create what is essentially the largest money laundering scheme in history. And while Americans have been working to make ends meet, they have been using taxpayer dollars to fund unnecessary, egregious, and even evil things here at home and around the world. Thankfully, in DOGE, we have a president bringing the leadership needed and a focused effort, along with the talent, technology, tools, and transparency to this waste, fraud, and abuse. And to those who would stand opposed to this effort, I would just point out, while it's understandable to find waste, fraud, and abuse that has grown and metastasized in this government even over decades, certainly accelerated over the last few years, to continue to protect it is corruption. I want to thank the chair for beginning this war on waste on this side of Pennsylvania Avenue and bringing together this committee. This effort is so important as we work to relieve the Americans, people of this burden of waste, fraud, and abuse. Mr. Talco, you mentioned in your written statement and talked about it in your statement at the beginning that this waste, fraud, and abuse is a national security threat. And certainly one of the challenges facing us that is a national security threat is our fiscal situation. And so we have got to find ways to find savings to the American people in order to bring confidence to the bond markets, to put our country on a fiscal footing, and to reverse the curse, so to speak, that we are placing on our children and our grandchildren. You mentioned a couple threats, though. You mentioned internal threats. You said that these cases involve government employees, individuals entrusted with administering benefits who, instead of using their positions to approve fraudulent claims, override security controls, or even sell sensitive claimant information for profit. Now, this is not every federal employee for sure, but within the context of people who are trying to give their best effort, we have an internal threat. But you also mentioned transnational fraud rings, terrorist organizations, nation states, North Korea, nuclear weapons program, funded by our tax dollars, China, Nigeria, Iran, Romania, Russia, not our friends necessarily that are being funded by taxpayer dollars. Could you give us some examples of how this is happening?
Yeah, so when you think about what happened during the pandemic, $1 trillion was stolen. 70% of that money went overseas. And I can give you some examples. In a Western state, they had more people applying for unemployment insurance benefits than they had individuals over 18. The people that were stealing the money from Romania were using it to facilitate other fraud schemes that include fentanyl, that include doing things to impact our democracy. On the insider threat, right, the first thing you have to say, and my dad was a public servant, is 99% of people that work in the public sector are honest, hardworking individuals. But there are some, and what you need is data and technology to root that out. There were examples during the pandemic, there were some examples even of last week where people got into the Medicaid system in a Western state and stole $50 million in less than 4 months. So you have to have these controls in place, right? These aren't individuals stealing, Mr. Cloud. These are organized criminal groups, both domestic and transnational.
Progress is a philosophy, a choice, a reason to keep going. Introducing the next generation of Tonal. We took the smartest, most effective strength training system in the world and made it stronger. Now lift up to 250 pounds of adaptive weight. Feel the perfect blend of cardio and strength training. And build muscle up to 2 times faster. This is progress that powers progress. Tonal, power, progress.
That, as you mentioned, taxpayers are being forced to fund the demise of our own country. Mr. Winston, I wanted to ask you, because there's a lot of talk about reconciliation right now. You mentioned Medicaid and what could be done to bring a pretty substantial amount of savings, and this is without affecting those who truly need Medicaid and for what the purpose of the program was extended for. Now,
The gentleman's time has expired. Does the witness want to answer the question?
No, only to
quickly.
say that yes, there's a tremendous amount of savings that can be found from the streamlining rule, but also work requirements in the program is another big area that can be done in reconciliation, and that could save a significant amount as well, $241 billion in federal spending over 10 years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. I now recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Garcia.
Well, thank you. Thank you to all of our witnesses for being here. And I want to just start off by making something clear. I think we're all here to fight against the lies, the corruptions, and the attacks on our social safety net. Now, we should in no way be cooperating with House Republicans who want to shut down the Department of Education and destroy Medicare and Medicaid. And we should not stand by as the richest man on the planet gives himself and his companies huge tax cuts while the American people get absolutely nothing. Now, I find it ironic, of course, that our chairwoman, Congresswoman Green, is in charge of running this committee. Now, in the last Congress, Chairwoman Green literally showed a dick pic in our oversight congressional hearing, so I thought I'd bring one as well. Now, this, of course, we know is President Elon Musk. He's also the world's richest man. He was the biggest political donor in the last election. He has billions of dollars in conflicts of interest, and we know that he is leading a power grab, also abided by and encouraged by Donald Trump and, of course, the chairwoman, Congresswoman Green. But I also want to run through what DOGE actually is going to do. It's a demolition plan that's going to run through our government. DOGE is trying to abolish the Department of Education. That means opportunities denied to kids. It means you're ripping away opportunities for children with disabilities who are dependent on this money. You're also halting medical research, which is also critical, which we have to also stop. The idea that we are going to eliminate or destroy the Department of National Institutes of Health, NIH, is crazy. Let's talk about the Department of Labor. We're talking about protections for working people across this country, where people can actually complain about abuses their companies are making against them and their coworkers. Workers are now going to be in danger. Let's also talk about the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, another huge issue for us. Think about the scammers and fraudsters that will be empowered across this country because Elon Musk wants, essentially, these companies have more power over consumers and over people across this country. Look at the Centers for Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. That is actually what's being discussed partly today. Healthcare, we're talking about being denied to millions of poor people, working class people across this country. And now, of course, they're on to their largest target, the U.S. Social Security Administration. We're talking about the destruction of the actual social safety net in this country. We know that 1 in 5 Americans collect Social Security. Seniors, disabled people. This entire plan is about hurting the American social safety net and destroying our institutions. And it's important that we actually call out what is happening at this subcommittee. This is not about working with the richest man on the planet. This is actually about empowering. This committee wants to empower the richest person in the world to hurt people so they can take all of this money that they so-called want to save and then give it to themselves, their companies, and their billionaire friends. That is the attack that is happening in this committee and across this country, and it's important that we call it out. We also know, of course, that Elon Musk is sending his unqualified DOGE staff to carry out this agenda across all these agencies. And in some cases, actually teenage staffers. No accountability, no experience, and problematic records. They're trying to rob you, and they're probably a minor. Thank you, and I yield back.
Weeds controlled. Visit weedman.com for a free quote.
The gentleman yields, and I now recognize the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Timmons, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I find it sad that my colleagues across the aisle can't take this seriously. We have $36 trillion in debt. We run an annual almost $2 trillion deficit. When I got elected 6 years ago, we had $21 trillion in debt. So in 6 years, we've added over $15 trillion to the debt. And guess what? President Trump ran on fixing this problem. President Trump told the American people he would right the ship financially, and he said during the campaign that Elon Musk was going to be the person to lead this charge. The man that has turned business after business around, he's the richest man on the planet because he succeeds at his endeavors, and that's why President Trump has appointed him the head of this effort. This is a very serious problem, and it's incredibly hypocritical that my colleagues across the aisle are complaining about this because Joe Biden signed his name and wanted the American people to believe that he had the ability to forgive $250 billion with a signature. Guess what? Supreme Court ruled he did not. That's our system of checks and balances. The president, Biden, he clearly was experiencing cognitive decline. He didn't even have the ability to be charged with a crime as determined by his own Department of Justice. But he signs his name and he thinks it gives $250 billion away, redistributes taxpayer dollars. It's just crazy that we can't come together to address the greatest national security threat facing this country, our debt. Now to the task at hand. Medicaid fraud. Mr. Talcove, if we implement enhanced identity verification and enhanced income verification, what will happen? How much money will we save?
You'll save hundreds of billions of dollars. Identity verification, elimination of self-certification, and monitoring beneficiaries will prevent these transnational criminal groups from accessing those systems at scale so legitimate people who need the benefits can get them in a timely fashion.
So we're going to get actual benefits to people, to American citizens that are in need faster, because if you do it electronically through web-based, like they did in Missouri, where the pilot program saved almost 20% of Medicaid dollars. So all we have to do is adopt what has already been proven in Missouri, and we'll save 20%. To the people out there listening, we spend almost $900 billion every year on Medicaid. And if 20% of that is saved, that's almost $200 billion. We got a $1.8 trillion annual deficit. We just knocked off $200 billion. Let's keep this train going. The fact that the Democrats are filing lawsuit after lawsuit to impede the efforts of President Trump to right our fiscal ship is unforgivable. It's unforgivable. Mr. Talcove, you talked about pandemic fraud. I have a bill that would cause the IRS to share data with the Small Business Administration and the FBI and the Department of Justice that would show that you were ineligible for PPP loans and you got them. So I think that would save probably $100 billion. Do you think that we should go back and take money away from people that fraudulently got COVID money?
During the pandemic, the PPP program was a virtual buffet for fraudsters, and it was because of that 1974 Privacy Act, where data sharing and matching is virtually impossible. Congress needs to change that.
But we can do it retroactively. We can do it retroactively. We can find the people that stole this money, hold them accountable, probably get some of the money back. So I already have that bill filed. That bill, I think, would probably get $100 billion. So now we got enhanced identity verification, enhanced income verification that has been proven in Missouri. It does work. So I'm working on that bill. We're going to drop it soon. That's $200 billion. There's a competition in Congress. I think we should have a competition on this committee. I got $300 billion in savings proposed. We got to all pull our weight because we have such a massive problem right now. But I would just ask my colleagues across the aisle to get out of the way if you don't want to help. If you don't want to help right the fiscal ship in this country, get out of the way. Stop filing lawsuit after lawsuit. We do not have the financial ability to continue down this path, and we're going to save this country with or without you. You can kick and scream all the way, or you can get out of the way. I prefer the former. Thank you, Madam Chair.
The gentleman yields. I now recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Kassar.
This subcommittee is supposedly about looking into waste, fraud, and abuse. So I'd like to start talking about independent inspector generals who are supposed to be looking into waste, fraud, and abuse. Mr. Talcove, do you know how many inspector generals at agencies that were investigating Elon Musk's companies have been fired by the Trump-Musk administration?
No.
It is 5. Ms. Royal, the Inspector General at the Department of Labor had 17 open investigations into Tesla and SpaceX. Do you know what the Trump-Musk administration did to that Inspector General?
No.
They fired him, and I think y'all know. Mr. Whitson, the Inspector General at the Department of Transportation was investigating Tesla. Do you know what the Trump-Musk administration did to that Inspector General?
No.
They were fired. The Department of Defense's Inspector General was looking into SpaceX. Mr. Hedler, do you know what the Trump-Musk administration did to that Inspector General?
I believe he was fired.
Thank you. I think everybody on the panel knows what the answer to these questions were. The U.S. Department of Agriculture Inspector General was investigating Musk's Neuralink. Mr. Talcove, now I'll ask you again under oath, do you know what Mr. Trump did to that Inspector General that was looking into one of Musk's companies?
No.
He was fired. The Inspector General at the EPA was repeatedly taking on Tesla. Mr. Hedler, since it seems that you're answering the questions that everyone knows the answer to, do you know what the Trump-Musk administration did to that Inspector General?
I believe he was also fired.
Also fired. at least 5 inspector generals that were looking into Elon Musk's companies were fired by the Trump-Musk administration. These inspector generals, who are independent, protected by law, they are the people that find the waste, fraud, and abuse and found many of the cases of waste, fraud, and abuse that have been brought up today, fired because they were looking into Elon Musk. At the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board, which is supposed to protect workers from getting their unions busted by folks like Elon Musk, made functionally broken by the so-called Department of Government Efficiency that really is the Department of Government Efficiency for Elon Musk, not for you. They are trying to shut down the Department of Education, the Department of Labor. You know what Elon Musk doesn't seem to be looking into? His own contracts. Again, I'll ask you, Mr. Talcove, do you know how much money a day Mr. Musk will receive from the federal government for his contracts?
No.
The answer is $8 million a day. Just last year, Elon Musk was promised $3 billion from close to 100 contracts with the federal government. Ms. Royal, do you know how much the average person in this country who survives on Social Security, one of our seniors who's worked their entire life, about how much they have to survive on a day?
I do not.
$65 a day. We're not looking into Elon Musk's $8 million a day. This subcommittee, chaired by Marjorie Taylor Greene and the House Republicans, is looking into your grandmother's $65 a day. Let me be clear. I think we would all support taxpayer savings. Look into money we might needlessly send to billionaires and big corporations, find taxpayer savings, and send it back to your hardworking family. But instead, what House Republicans and the Trump-Musk administration want to do is they want to look into your kids' lunch money, your kids' teacher's salary, into your grandparents' Social Security. They want to take that money and give it out in billionaire tax cuts, and they're talking about that in committee tomorrow. In Budget Committee tomorrow, they just released their plan. So let me be clear. When Republicans talk about government efficiency in this Congress, they're not looking into billionaires who don't pay their taxes. They're not looking into billionaires who get rich off of government contracts. They're not looking into Elon Musk firing watchdogs who are supposed to keep him accountable. They're looking at cutting your public schools. They're going straight for your Social Security. They're coming straight for cancer research. They're coming straight for the Department of Education. They're not looking at big tech. They're not looking at big pharma because those people fund their campaigns. If this committee were serious about rooting out waste from our federal government, then today's whole hearing would be about how Musk and Donald Trump are firing the independent watchdogs who've done this work for decades. Instead, my Republican colleagues' actual goal on this committee is to distract from Trump and from Musk's corrupt war on accountability. This will not be a subcommittee dedicated to making government efficient for everyday people. It's about helping Elon Musk and Donald Trump be as efficient as possible in robbing our government and handing out our government services to the rich. So this seems that this subcommittee is just
The gentleman's
like
time
the
has
agency it's named
expired.
after.
The gentleman's
a sham,
time has expired.
a total sham.
The American people are $36 trillion in debt. It certainly seems reasonable that someone has been fired. I now recognize the gentleman from Tennessee.
You're going to put us
Mr.
further in debt
Burchett.
with your billionaire
You're
tax
not
cuts.
recognized. Mr. Burchett, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Lady. The gravy train, for a lot of these folks, it's been on biscuit wheels, and it's about to run off the dadgum tracks, and it's about time. Could you imagine standing up here and defending waste, fraud, and abuse? But I think that's what we're seeing. When people squeal and don't ask questions, I think it shows the American public what the heck's going on. And that little gravy train is getting ready to run out. The spigot is getting ready to be turned off. Mr. Talcove, that's correct how you say your name, brother?
Yes, sir.
All right. How can the federal government improve identity verification for these entitlement programs?
Yeah, it's doing what the private sector does every single day, whether you use your bank, you go to Amazon, using those tools and moving away from some of the dated compliance standards that the federal government uses. NIST IAL 863, 2017, before there was anything called deepfakes and generative AI tools.
I was informed that PayPal has never been, they've never been able to crack into that and steal people's vital information. Are they using those systems that you would be favorable towards that government seems to be shying away from?
Yes, sir.
And describe that, how that works.
They're systems that are based on encryption. They use technology and they use data to validate you are who you say you are. The people that are stealing right now, I believe a lot of them are actually ghosts from China, Russia, Nigeria, and Romania.
I read a report today that North Korea was involved in this, in some of that as well.
They are.
And those people are our enemies. Again, they'll hate us for free. We don't have to give them taxpayer money. And are there loopholes that can be closed to avoid these improper payments? And I wish you'd describe those to me.
The biggest, most important thing, particularly in the benefit program space, is the use of self-certification. As Mr. Timmons noted, the state of Missouri is using a solution called Steady IQ to validate wages and wealth. You cannot allow individuals to provide the information based upon what they think. It has to be based on what you know, and that will stop the ghosts from using people's identities to steal money from U.S. taxpayers.
How much money do you calculate is wasted due to waste, fraud, and abuse in the entitlement programs each year?
Yeah, my number right now between federal, state, and local government is you can save $1 trillion a year by simply putting in front-end identity verification, eliminating self-certification, and monitoring the back end of the programs that are providing the benefits. Those three things.
You said you could eliminate that, but is there others you feel like some more low-hanging fruit?
I would start with those three things because they're simple. That'll take that 20% fraud rate that you're seeing in the public sector down below 5%.
Chair Lady, I would suggest that we adopt Mr. Timmons' legislation and get that out of the committee as fast as possible. What actions also could Congress take to fix these problems quickly?
Yeah, I think the first thing is updating and redoing the 1974 Privacy Act. That is virtually impossible to do data matching. It's very difficult to have data shared. And when you look back at the pandemic, data sharing and data matching would have stopped probably 50% of the $1 trillion that was stolen from taxpayers.
Any of y'all like to add anything to that?
Congressman, I would just add that rather than accepting self-attestation, that states should have to be required to actually verify people's identities. And here's the key part: before they get enrolled. They shouldn't get enrolled and then eventually come down later on down the road.
It's amazing to me. I have a doctor's appointment back in Knoxville, and the verification process is very extensive. It's more so than the federal government requires for any of this. What type of computer systems are these agencies using, and do they need updating?
They're using very dated technology, but they're also burdened. I look at the USDA, 6.2 million words in a 10,000-page document that shows how to implement the rules of the program. Nobody can figure that out. So one of the things that I think has to happen is the simplification of these processes and systems, and then just use the technology that we use every day in the private sector.
Okay, thank y'all so much for being here.
The gentleman's time has expired.
Thank you, Chair Lady.
I now recognize the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Crockett, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Mr. Talcove, I'm just going to go ahead and pick up where you left off really quickly. Just to be clear, the upgrades that you're talking about as it relates to our data processes, these aren't things that would be free, are they? They would cost some kind of money. Not looking for a number, but they will cost, correct?
Some are free and some would cost money.
Okay. All right, so I just want to leave it there because we've had a number of these hearings. So I do want to be clear, before the Trump administration came in, this committee did exist in the form of the Oversight Committee, and our task is to root out waste, fraud, and abuse. In that vein, we had a number of hearings, at least last term. I can't speak for any other term as I'm only in my sophomore term, and we dealt with improper payments. And interestingly enough, our chairwoman, who is so passionate about this today, she missed every single one of those improper payment hearings. But just to be clear, I was there, so I don't want anyone to believe that Democrats just come to work and don't plan to do work. In fact, I'm trying to figure out exactly what it is that the Republicans believe our job is, because right now they have relinquished their constitutional duties over to an unelected bureaucrat, someone who no one went out to vote for. And absolutely, he is occupying the Oval Office, as we saw yesterday, and that is a first for me to see someone occupying the Oval Office who's never actually been elected to the Oval Office and actually answering more questions than the person that allegedly got elected. But for whatever reason, this is the first time we're having a DOGE subcommittee hearing, and that guy's not here. Instead, we have y'all. So I do want to thank you for coming. But I will say this, it's also interesting to me that in the first few days of DOGE existing, we know that they are trying to get rid of the Department of Education, USAID, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. They're laying off FAA workers. They are going after the FDA, the CDC, the HHS, the FBI agents, and they're talking about getting rid of FEMA. And they brought y'all in. And I am going to say that I actually was shocked that there was only one person that seemed like he was an overt Trumper as you laid out your opening remarks, because I anticipated that at least one of y'all would say, yes, what Elon is doing is exactly what we would prescribe. But instead, I will applaud you because you actually were focused. You talked about what the American people are looking for us to do. We've actually consistently on this side of the aisle promoted this idea of making investments into technology so that we can do things such as, say, look at the Department of Defense. The Department of Defense that takes up approximately 50% of our discretionary income, or our discretionary spending. Approximately 50% goes to Department of Defense. Department of Defense has not been able to pass an audit in the last 6 audits, and we're not talking about pennies. I understand that we want everything to be perfect, and if we could get all waste, fraud, and abuse out, that would be fantastic. But let me talk about the big numbers. The big numbers are on that side. When we look at, say, our entire workforce, our federal workforce, as we're trying to somehow fire all of them, they don't even make up a total of 5%. It's even less than that when we look at our budget. But let's talk about defense. That just happens to be the same side of the ledger that Mr. Musk gets the vast majority of his money from. In fact, at the same time that they were unlawfully, and we will stay in court, because on this side, we believe in law and order. We believe in, a number of us are actually lawyers, but nevertheless, we understand the Constitution. We believe in that as well. And so there's things such as, impoundment, right? Because as Mr. Whitson said, he said, we need to return the power of the purse to Congress. It never left. According to the Constitution, that's where it's at. Now, I know that people are confused right now because for whatever reason, we had a guy that went in, and you talk about people invading our data. Listen, people said that they were upset about TikTok, but I'm upset about the guy that runs Twitter, who for sure is doing nefarious things, because I don't understand, if you are trying to conduct audits and figure out where the waste, fraud, and abuse is, I don't know why you would go to some tech guy. In fact, it was only techies that were sitting there at inauguration. We didn't have auditors. I would welcome auditors to come in and do forensic audits. In fact, he sat there in the Oval Office yesterday and he admitted that he was lying, and he was using his propaganda machine to do it when he said that we sent millions of dollars to Gaza for condoms. That was a lie. So let me tell you something.
The gentlelady's time has expired. The gentlelady's time has expired.
Rein in this rogue actor known
The gentlelady's time has expired. I now recognize the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Burleson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to speak frankly at first to the American people. We're nearing $37 trillion in national debt. What does that mean? That means that each and every U.S. taxpayer owes over $323,000. Okay? What does that mean? That means when the EPIC, which is the Economic Policy Innovation Center, says we have 18 trillion left. That's it. 18 trillion left to take out. And we're spending $2 trillion in debt every year. Folks, We're at the precipice of a debt, we're like a debt cycle. We are literally at a point in which the dollar will be worth nothing. What does that mean? And we know Social Security goes bankrupt in 8 years, right? Medicare goes bankrupt in 10 years. And then 15 years from now, the dollar is completely devalued and worth nothing. So what does that mean? That means your pension, the money in your banks, your savings is nothing. It's worthless. So what are we doing? We're trying to save this country. We're trying to save your pensions. We're trying to save your bank accounts. We're trying to save this country for the next generation, and it would be nice if we had help. But instead, we have people that are fighting us on this. And I think that I would hate to be in the Democratic Party right now because you're in a really bad bind. You're having to defend all of this crazy spending, all of this crazy waste. So how do you do it? You do ad hominem attacks. You attack the messenger. Oh, Elon Musk, right? He's rich. He must be evil, right? That's the attacks. Really, you can't do any better than that, right? Let's talk on the policy. Help us. We're trying to save this country. This is and Elon Musk, who's making no money doing this, is trying to save this country. Why? Because he is invested in the United States of America more than anybody, right? So I think that we should embrace it. In fact, not a single company, governor of any state would ever turn down Elon Musk and his team of DOGE from coming in and providing free services to right the course and financially in any state or organization. It's ridiculous that we would demonize someone that loves this country so much. Mr. Whitman, the formation of agencies via the executive action is not new, right? The formation of DOGE is not new. Can you are you familiar with any other previous presidencies where they've formed organizations like DOGE via executive action?
Yeah, so actually the agency that DOGE is occupying is one that was created in a previous administration, so it is something that happens routinely. But I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, there's been the Office of Budget Management was created, Environmental Protection Agency was created, the U.S. Digital Service, which is now DOGE, was created all by executive order, right?
And actually one other I'd add is USAID was originally created through an executive order by President Kennedy and then later formalized.
And then, Madam Chair, I have a video I would like to end with that just, let's review, if we could cue that, and I want to remind my Democratic friends, at a point in which you once had the majority of the American people on your side, this is what your party believed in.
This report tells us how to cut waste, cut red tape, streamline the bureaucracy, change procurement rules, change the personnel rules, and create a government that works better and costs less.
I've read it, and where it says the president should, the president will.
Among the 800 recommendations, eliminating 12% of the federal workforce, merging some government agencies like the FBI, the DEA, and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, closing hundreds of government offices outside Washington.
From the day I took office, one of the commitments that I made to the American people was that we would do a better job here in Washington in rooting out wasteful spending. We thought that it was entirely appropriate for our governments and our agencies to try to root out waste, large and small, in a systematic way. It means cutting some programs that I think are worthy, but we may not be able to afford right now. A lot of the action is in Congress and legislative, but in the meantime, we don't need to wait for Congress in order to do something about wasteful spending that's out there. We haven't seen as much action out of Congress as we'd like, and that's why we launched on our own initiative the campaign to cut waste. And we're going to keep on finding every possible way that we can do that, even if Congress is not acting. There you go.
Stuck with nasal congestion? We've all been there. Afrin No Drip is here to help.
Wow!
Get ridiculously powerful nasal congestion relief in seconds. Stays right where it's sprayed.
I think it speaks for itself. My time has expired.
The gentleman's time has expired. Thank you. I now yield to the gentlewoman from the District of Columbia, Ms. Norton, for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Our Republican colleagues and the Trump administration continue to demonize our friends and neighbors who work for the federal government and swear an oath to protect the Constitution and serve the public. Thousands of civilian federal employees have given their lives in the line of duty for their country. The administration seems intent on dismantling much of the federal government in violation of the Constitution, statutes, and regulations. And our Republican colleagues are letting them do it. They want to gut the nonpartisan civil service and to convert a significant portion of the remaining civil service into political appointees. Depriving the federal government of employees' expertise and experience will harm the services that the government provides to all Americans. Mr. Hetler-Garlett, the administration is attempting to cause a mass exodus from our federal workforce. Will this increase or decrease waste, fraud, and abuse?
Thank you, Delegate Norton. I think it's pretty clear that chaos is not the friend of efficiency. If you undermine the very functionality of the government, you are not going to make it more efficient. You're going to make it worse, and it's going to cost even more money to recoup or to fix things that go wrong in the interim. So I mentioned earlier that if you care about waste, fraud, and abuse, firing Inspector General doesn't add up. I think if you care about government being more efficient, I think intentionally creating chaos is the opposite of that.
Well, Mr. Hetler-Garlett, do federal employees operate without oversight or rules and regulations?
No, absolutely not. They are governed by plenty of rules and regulations, and when there are independent inspector general at the agency they're supposed to be at, they also have a cop on the beat making sure that they do so.
I want to highlight some stories demonstrating exactly the kinds of federal workers the administration is trying to force out. How about Chris Mark at the Department of Labor, whose pioneering work on mine safety has reduced minor safety deaths from roof collapses to almost zero today? Or Jared Koopman at the Internal Revenue Service, who pioneered new methods for tracking criminal cybersecurity currency transactions that led to the rescue of 23 children from rape and assault, as well as the seizure of hundreds of millions of child abuse videos and 370 pedophile arrests. This work also prevented funding from going to terrorist groups. Or Ronald E. Walters, who manages the 155 national cemeteries around the country and tends to the resting places of almost 4 million veterans. These are just a few of the federal workers who serve Americans every day. The workers are wildland firefighters, border guards, doctors, nurses, food inspectors, air traffic controllers, and law enforcement that do their civic duty, often despite the fact that they could make such more in the private sector. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentlelady yields. I now yield to the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Jack.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I want to also thank you for convening this hearing. I think it's incredibly important, and I want to thank our witnesses for appearing before us today. Like another member of this committee, I too was once an employee of the Executive Office of the President. I worked in President Trump's White House from the very first to very last day of his first term, and I saw firsthand how entrenched and resistant the federal bureaucracy was to his agenda. So it's no surprise that today a few of my Democrat colleagues have continued that trend by using their time to bash Elon Musk instead of discussing ways to work together to advance a bipartisan cornerstone of President Trump's agenda, the mission to finally eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse. And I just took a rudimentary count of the Dems' testimony, or rather comments today, and I've got 27 mentions of Elon Musk and 3 mentions of waste. And I don't know if that's, in fact, the right count. Encourage anybody to fact check me, but I think it illuminates and illustrates one of the problems that we're facing, which is a lack of bipartisan effort to address these critical things that, waste, fraud, and abuse is something that should be bipartisan. The chair noted that in her opening remarks. Now, Madam Chair, you know how much I enjoy studying public opinion. So with your approval, I'd like to enter into the record the CBS News poll from this past weekend, conducted February 5th to 7th, 2025. And I'd also like to illuminate 2 findings. First, 70% of Americans, Democrats and Republicans included, believe President Trump is already doing the job that he was elected to, which is interesting because I have an article here from CNN from September 2024 that notes Trump says Elon Musk has agreed to lead proposed government efficiency commission as ex-president unveils new economic plans. So he is doing exactly what he said he would do by empowering his administration to root out waste, fraud, and abuse, and that's exactly what we're trying to do here today. I'd also like to note one interesting statistic from that. 62% of Americans want Democrats in Congress to work with us to advance the priorities that President Trump was elected to govern on. So I think those are 2 stats that I hope everyone pays attention to. But to ask questions of our witnesses, I'd first like to start with Mr. Talcove. One of the things that I've found very interesting from your opening testimony is you talked, and I think you engaged with Mr. Burchett on the 1974 Privacy Act. And I had some interesting folks visit my office yesterday who noted that 1/3 of all prior authorizations are still done manually by phone, fax, or direct post mail. First off, would love your comments on that, and I'd also like for you to expound upon some of the solutions that we can deliver to this Congress in modernizing that 1974 Privacy Act.
Yeah, these aren't people problems. These are technology problems. You can't process the number of individuals that are accessing our systems person by person. It just takes too much time. So by updating the 1974 Privacy Act and allowing for digital matching, you would have very quickly realized that a large portion of the PPP loan funds were going to the wrong person. You would have been quickly able to match, and I think the number was 20% were on the do not pay list. You can't expect people to do what a machine, and especially AI, can do today.
Fair enough. Thank you very much for that. And if I can also ask Mr. Whitson, I think we share a common interest, which is to move departments and agencies outside of Washington, D.C. It's something that I campaigned on, something that I helped President Trump effectuate in his first administration. And I have to imagine that if we have departments and agencies outside of D.C., if we've got a workforce that's more reflective of the balance that America is, we at the same time, too, could potentially root out some of this waste, fraud, and abuse by enabling other Americans, other citizens of our country to help advance some of these issues. So would love your commentary on that before my time expires.
No, I think you're exactly right, Congressman Jack. And so I think, you'd save a lot of taxpayer money. So building a headquarters in downtown D.C. versus Huntsville, Alabama, you're going to be able to save a lot of money. Number 2, you're actually going to make life better for the employees as well. So that's a point that's also missed a lot, but commuting into D.C. versus being able to go somewhere else where it's a better cost of living and things like that might be better for the folks. And then lastly, these areas where you set up a headquarters are going to be populated by people that live in the area to fill the rank and file of staff positions. And so if you plant these federal agency headquarters in the heart of any area that's overwhelmingly one party or the other, then you're going to naturally get that sway versus something that's more representative of the people as a whole.
Well, thank you very much, our witnesses. Mindful of my time, I want to finish before my time expires. I yield back to our chairwoman, Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Thank you.
And Chairwoman, I would like to ask for unanimous consent to enter something into the record.
So what is it?
It is a report from the Congressional Research Service, nonpartisan CRS, that lays out the rules and the law for firing inspectors general, which of course look into waste, fraud, and abuse. And
without objection.
Thank you. And that rule requires for the law to be followed, for Congress to be notified with 30 days and a reason for firing inspectors general to give Congress a chance to overrule that, and that's the law. So thank you for entering that into the record.
Madam Chair. Without objection, the materials Mr. Jack cited are also submitted for the record. I now recognize.
Apologies. While we're on it, I'd also like to ask for unanimous consent to submit for the record 2 items. One is a statement from the AFL-CIO, Department of People who work for a living with views on working people to make the government work. And the second is a statement from the Center for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington on ways to combat waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal government.
Without objection, so ordered. I now recognize the gentlelady from New Mexico and Ranking Member Ms. Stansbury for 5 minutes.
All right. Well, thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and thank you once again to all of our witnesses for being here to testify. Thank you to my colleagues. We are going to have so much fun in this committee, this Congress. I actually appreciate the video that was shown just a few moments ago, because when I worked at the Office of Management and Budget, I actually worked on the waste EO that was referenced that President Obama signed. But there is one fundamental difference between the presidents and vice presidents that were shown on that video and what's happening today, and that is that they followed the law. So my colleagues across the aisle who are asking us to get out of the way and stop trying to block things in the courts, let me tell you, we do not work for an unelected billionaire like apparently this guy does. We work for the American people. And so if an unelected, unvetted individual private citizen is hacking our government systems, breaking the law, firing federal employees, dismantling statutorily created agencies, withholding funds, we are going to fight you in the courts. And I'm actually really sad that my dear friend Mr. Burchett left, because I want to talk about that gravy train on biscuit wheels that he just talked about, because that gravy train is not the federal workforce, it's the billionaires that are trying to hack that system right now, in which unfortunately my colleagues right now are working on a reconciliation deal to cut Medicaid, to cut Medicare, and use that money to give to tax breaks to their billionaire buddies. That is the gravy train that is actually going on here. But because this is the Oversight Committee, let's do a little bit of oversight. For the last several weeks, I've been talking to Treasury and OMB officials to try to get to the bottom of why Elon Musk and his team are trying to hack the Treasury payment system. Because this is a completely nonpartisan system that literally just pays the bills of the federal government. So why are they so eager to hack this system? And I have to say that over the last several weeks, we have literally received thousands of calls in every single congressional office. In fact, we know that our friends across the aisle are also receiving these calls because this system pays the bills of the U.S. government. It pays our soldiers. It pays for the work that we do overseas. It pays your Social Security benefits. It pays your tax refunds. So why is Elon Musk and his hackers trying to access that system? And why did a senior civil servant who had overseen this system for over 30 years get asked to stand down after a 25-year-old intern working for Elon Musk tried to get access to the code for that system? Now, thankfully, they were shut down in the court system, but Musk has installed, with the president's blessing, one of his Silicon Valley buddies, who I want to point out, in which the media has not paid a lot of attention to, is the CEO of a private IT company, including Citrix, that has millions of dollars in IT contracts with the federal government. And not only is he still operating as the installed DOGE person at Treasury, he's actively still the CEO of this private company. How is that even legal? Is it legal? I don't think it's legal, because the federal court is trying to shut this down. We also know that that 25-year-old software engineer, in violation of the court order, was actually given access to modify the code. So what is going on here? And why is this such a threat to the American people? Why are thousands of people calling us? It's because of the size and the significance of these payments, because it is an invasion of the privacy and security of the American people, because it could threaten our ability as a country if there was a default in the debt ceiling, and because it contains highly classified information that our foreign adversaries are trying to cyber attack us regularly for. So why is a private citizen being given access to this system. We know they're trying to shut down payments. They're trying to shut down agencies. What's next? Are they going to shut down your Social Security payments? We don't know, because they have no oversight, and Elon Musk will not come in front of this committee. And in fact, the Treasury folks are saying this is the biggest insider threat they've ever seen in the history of the agency. So we are sounding the alarm, and no matter how many executive orders that Donald Trump signs or how many tweets that the VP sends, you cannot rewrite the Constitution, and we are going to hold you to account. I yield back.
The gentlelady yields, and I now recognize, oh, yes.
I have 3 documents I want to submit.
Sleep can change everything. It can turn you into the morning workout person you used to hate. Sleep can give you the energy to read just one more story, and sleep can even help give you more birthdays with them. So, how do you sleep at night?
For the record, the first document is the Constitution, Article 2. I would like to submit that for the record. That clearly spells out the president's authority. I would also like to submit for the record 5 U.S. Code 3161, the employment compensation of employees, which clearly spells out his authority to create DOGE. And then I want to submit for the record the executive order that Trump issued on January 20th of 2025, establishing DOGE officially.
Without objection, so ordered. I now recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Gill, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for hosting this committee. If we've learned anything so far, it's that Republicans want to cut waste, fraud, and abuse from our federal government and save taxpayer dollars, and Democrats want to grandstand and play politics. We can see right now, even, of the 6 Democrats on this committee, only 1 can even be bothered to stay for the duration of this hearing. All we've heard about for most of this hearing from the other side of the aisle is Elon Musk, Elon Musk, Elon Musk, unelected bureaucrat. And I'd like to ask if Democrats really care about unelected bureaucrats making decisions over our lives, where were they whenever their god Anthony Fauci was forcing vaccine and mask mandates on the American people for 4 years during the during the COVID crisis? Where were they whenever unelected Alejandro Mayorkas was facilitating the invasion of our country by illegal aliens who were murdering and raping and pillaging our people? Where were they whenever the Secretary of Education, unelected Cardona, targeted states and schools and people who were disagreed with his view of the radical left's transgender ideology? Where were they whenever Gary Gensler, former chairman of the SEC, also unelected, was lawlessly thwarting the development of financial markets, particularly in the crypto space, by lawlessly pursuing regulation via enforcement? They were nowhere to be seen because they don't care, because all of those things benefited their side of the aisle at the expense of ours. And perhaps that's also why they don't seem to be very interested in rooting out improper payments from our federal government. If you wonder why so many people are cynical about American politics, this is it. This is exactly why. The reality is that Elon Musk serves as an employee of the president, and we were given a massive mandate to carry out what he's been doing. His job is to carry out the will of the American people as expressed through the executive. That's exactly how the Constitution is supposed to work. The Constitution did not create an unelected, unaccountable 4th branch of government in the administrative state. The American people know this. My colleague Brian Jack discussed some of the opinion polls recently. We are doing, and President Trump is doing, exactly what he was elected to do. And that's why he's polling at a 53% approval rating, higher than he was at any point during his first administration. Even Elon Musk and his DOGE efforts now are polling at a 49% approval rating, which, just to point out, is 16 points higher than President Biden was polling at whenever he finished his term in office. The Democrat Party has for decades systematically grown and weaponized the administrative state against the American people, and the American people have had enough of it. Right now, we're talking about $2.7 trillion in improper payments since 2003. We're uncovering what could be the biggest money laundering scandal in American history. And the other side of the aisle could care less. They have no concern about where this money went, to what entities it went, to what governments, to what people or groups. Nothing. All they want to talk about is Elon Musk incessantly. So it does make me wonder, if they don't care about where it's going, do they have an idea? Because what we've uncovered so far is that so much of the waste, fraud, and abuse of our federal government is actually funding their side of the aisle. It's funding media outlets that are running cover for Democrats routinely. The NPR, PBS, the BBC, Politico. It's going to fund left-wing NGOs that are facilitating the invasion of our country. It's going to fund left-wing transgender activism and sex changes all over the globe. This is money that's being used, taken from the American people and used against their interests. If you care about rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse, we should be serious about this. I'm very excited to be on this committee. I'm excited to expose what's being going on. Thank you, Madam Chair, and with that, I yield.
The gentleman yields. In closing, I want to thank our witnesses again for their testimonies today. I now yield to the ranking member for closing remarks.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Well, I never thought so many conspiracy theories and my friends across the aisle. First of all, let's talk about this massive mandate that supposedly brought Donald Trump into office. Donald Trump did not run on putting an unelected billionaire in charge of dismantling the federal government. He ran on lowering prices for Americans. And I think it's interesting that while we're sitting here this morning, the top of the New York Times is reporting that inflation has risen unexpectedly as food and energy prices have soared. What's going on, guys? I thought you were going to tackle inflation and food and energy prices. Isn't that what the executive orders were supposed to do? Oh, wait. Or is dismantling diversity, equity, and inclusion in our federal agencies and putting an ideological agenda and trying to fire the federal workforce your actual agenda? Have you been too busy trying to actually address the fiscal health of this country? Because the numbers are telling us that you have. So let's be real about what's going on here. I also want to point out that literally while we've been sitting here for the last almost 2 hours getting lectured on fiscal responsibility, literally the Republicans just released their plan to raise the debt limit while we were sitting here. And they want to raise it by $4 trillion. Okay, guys, like literally, I'm just like without words. Inflation is going up. You want to raise the debt ceiling by $4 trillion. You want to gut Medicare. You want to gut Medicaid. You're talking about going after Social Security after promising that you wouldn't. I mean, really, what the heck is going on here? We're not trying to take down Elon Musk as a businessman. This dude is literally breaking the law inside of the federal government. And for a party that is supposed to be the party of law and order, in quotes, I really do not see you holding him accountable and doing your most basic constitutional responsibility in the separation of powers. So, I want to end where I started. We are the Oversight Committee. We are the People's House for the United States of America. We represent the American people. And so, Mr. Elon Musk, if you would like to appear in front of the Oversight Committee, you have been duly invited. Please, come tell us what you're doing. Come testify in front of the American people. And please, come hold yourself to account. With that, I yield back.
The gentlelady yields. I now recognize myself for closing remarks. President Trump was elected with a mandate to rein in unaccountable bureaucracy in Washington and to wage war on waste. I know that because I campaigned alongside him, and so did my colleagues. This hearing was the first battle of that war, and in the coming days, the subcommittee will release a report with legislative solutions to the problems we have identified here today. We aren't going to wait all the way until the end of this Congress. We're going to get to work immediately. The bureaucrats who have run Washington for decades are beyond the point of forgiveness. Their sheer incompetence and pure spite for the hardworking American people have resulted in total failure. The federal government has made over $2.7 trillion in improper payments since 2003, including $236 billion in 2023 alone. Those are trillions of dollars that honest Americans have paid in taxes at gunpoint over the years. As we approach April 15th, Americans are once again preparing to do their taxes and fork over their unfair share of money it takes to run this country. And I have to tell you, the American people have not been getting their money's worth for a long time. Most improper payments in recent years were issued through 5 programs: Medicare, Medicaid, the Earned Income Tax Credit, Pandemic Unemployment Insurance, and the Paycheck Protection Program. But a total of 16 federal programs had improper payment rates of 10% or more in 2023. That includes SNAP, the federal food stamp program, which paid out $10 billion taxpayer dollars improperly. To get their arms around this problem, Elon Musk and the DOGE team went straight to the source. They went to the Treasury Department's Fiscal Service, which makes about 90% of the trillions in federal payments issued annually. The audit of these payment systems was long overdue. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent gave DOGE employees working for the government read-only access to these systems so they could conduct that initial audit. That audit is already paying dividends. Musk learned that the databases federal agencies are supposed to check to prevent payments to fraudsters, crime rings, and dead people are not being kept up to date. Going forward, we are going to get more mileage out of these do not pay databases. That means fewer improper payments and less fraud and waste of taxpayer dollars. Despite this fraud that's already been revealed, a federal judge in New York issued a ruling last Friday that ran totally contrary to the will of the people. The judge blocked not only DOGE, but the Treasury Secretary himself from accessing his own agency's payment systems. That's absurd. Only career Treasury Department unelected bureaucrats can access the system, the judge ruled. This turns the Constitution on its head. We will hold this judge and others who try to stop the will of the people and their elected leaders accountable.
7 million U.S. businesses rely on TikTok to compete.
Within a week of posting, I had over $25,000 in sales.
Small businesses thrive on TikTok.
TikTok brings in so much foot traffic.
I need TikTok to keep growing.
As is written in the Federalist Papers, the judiciary has no influence over either the sword or the purse, no direction either of the strength or the wealth of the society. It may truly be said to have neither force nor will, but merely judgment, and must ultimately depend upon the aid of the executive arm for the efficacy of its judgments. But the whole DC swamp is freaking out that the unelected officials from DOGE were allowed access to these systems. That makes no sense. Federal judges were not elected. The Treasury bureaucrats were not elected, and they have failed to fix the problem that is enabling American taxpayers to be robbed. So why not bring in skilled outside experts like private companies and private citizens who are successful in the real world to do everyday work that we need to get done here, like audits? Of course, federal payment systems are only one link in the improper payment chain. We need to look at other links in the chain. We need better front-end identify verification to screen out fraudsters, and we need to close eligibility loopholes. That means not letting applicants self-attest to their own eligibility. And it means ending categorical eligibility, which lets someone who fraudulently qualifies for one federal benefit automatically get other federal benefits. Finally, we need to better coordinate fraud prevention efforts between federal governments and the states. These are all issues that we will be taking a hard look at in this committee and coming up with solutions to, including legislation and referrals to committees of jurisdiction that will deliver for the American people. With that and without objection, all members have 5 legislative days within which to submit materials and additional written questions for the witnesses, which will be forwarded to the witnesses. If there is no further business without objection, the subcommittee stands adjourned.
The Subcommittee on Cybersecurity, Information Technology, and Government Innovation will now come to order and welcome a good afternoon. Without objection, the chair may declare a recess at any time. I recognize myself for the purpose of making an opening statement. Good afternoon. Late last year, the White Coat Waste Project exposed more than $10 million in taxpayer funds that were spent creating transgender mice, rats, and monkeys. These DEI grants funded painful and deadly transgender experiments that forced lab animals to undergo invasive surgeries and hormone therapies at universities across the country. For example, the Biden-Harris administration spent $2.5 million taxpayer dollars to study the fertility of transgender mice. Let that sink in. We spent over $2 million studying the fertility of transgender mice. $1.1 million was spent to find out if female rats receiving testosterone therapies to mimic transgender men were more likely to overdose on a party drug, commonly used in the LGBTQ community to induce drug-fueled what's called, quote, chemsex. I asked my staff what was chemsex and the chemical, and I guess it's something called GHB, which is a date rape drug, and also a drug that's used recreationally. So we spent over $1 million to find out if female rats receiving testosterone therapy were more likely to overdose on a date rape drug. Like, that's what your taxpayer dollars were being spent on. Federal funds were also used to forcibly transition male monkeys to see if hormone therapy made them more susceptible to HIV. Now, I didn't know this until recently, but monkeys cannot be infected with HIV. Yet this federally funded experiment forced them to take hormone-altering drugs to study a virus they cannot have. The Biden-Harris administration was so eager to propagate their radical gender ideology across all facets of American society that they were surgically mutating animal genitals. Like, taxpayer money went to that. So my question is, were they castrating mice, castrating monkeys? Were they getting double mastectomies? The language that they used in many of these experiments were, quote, gender-affirming care, which I learned about 3 years ago what that meant. I thought that was maybe just some hormones or something, something like that. But apparently gender-affirming care is actually surgical mutilation of genitals. And apparently it's not just humans they're doing it to. We were doing it with taxpayer dollars to animals. It's well known that because of the differences between animal and human biology, animal testing frequently does not produce results relevant for humans. In fact, 90% of novel drugs that are successful in animal tests fail in human clinical trials. Today's scientific questions are so complex that we have well surpassed a time where it is useful or appropriate to rely on inhumane animal experiments to answer them. Recently developed technological tools can more accurately model human biology and identify solutions that are more useful for human patients. But it is often the federal bureaucracy that prevents these new technologies from being used. Instead of adequately investing in these innovative alternatives, the federal government has continued to funnel taxpayer dollars towards cruel animal experiments. Today, most of the 27 NIH institutes and centers conduct or support animal testing, as does the Food and Drug Administration, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the Department of Veterans Affairs, the Department of Defense, and countless other agencies. We have some beagle puppies here with us today. Beagle puppies have gone through some of the worst medical experiments. I mean, drugging them with cocaine, having insects eat at them and their bodies so much until they die, drugging them until they die. These are God's creatures, and they're beautiful, and you can see them sitting in the front row today. So we thank the folks who are here and brought these beautiful beagle puppies here today. In fact, the U.S. government spends in excess of $20 billion a year conducting experiments on animals. The White Coat Waste Project found in 2021 that the NIH, the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, a component of NIH at the time, ran by Dr. Fauci, spent $1.68 million force-feeding toxic drugs to beagle puppies between 6 and 8 months old before dissecting and killing them. The conversation we're having today is important. In 2022, due to public criticism lobbied against Fauci's NIAID by me and other members of Congress, another $1.8 million experiment to abuse beagle puppies in various drug tests was canceled. So I want to thank the work of White Coat Waste and everyone in the room today, others who've been on the forefront of this fight to end this sick and cruel and barbaric testing of animals today. Thanks to one of our witnesses, Justin Goodman of White Coat Waste. We have in the audience, I already know, the beagles are here. The beagles are a reminder of the real cost of animal experimentation. So I'm looking forward to this conversation this afternoon regarding wasteful government spending on animal cruelty. And I also want to say, before I yield over to the ranking member for her opening statement, that this is a nonpartisan issue. Ironically, in oversight, where we might fight a lot in public, we are actually very nonpartisan here, and some of the most nonpartisan work in Congress comes right through this committee. So I want to thank the ranking member, look forward to working with you, and I yield to you for 5 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you, and good afternoon to our 3 witnesses. Thanks for being here. Chairwoman Mace, I appreciated working with you last week to introduce a bipartisan bill to strengthen federal contractor cybersecurity. I was glad our teams were able to connect early into this new Congress, and on a personal note, my team found your staff to be very responsive and helpful. Likewise. As the ranking member of this subcommittee, I look forward to continuing to work with you to modernize and secure federal IT systems from potential cyber attacks. Bipartisan solutions like this are critical to protecting our federal system from cyber threats. I look forward to finding more common ground and delivering results for the American people. I'm looking forward to having a productive discussion today about the scientific innovations and the need for additional oversight of alternatives to animal testing. Each year, millions of animals, including dogs, cats, and monkeys, are used worldwide for research, and I think it's safe to assume that everyone here in this room would like to see that number reduced. We are living in a moment where there have been extraordinary advancements in medical research utilizing groundbreaking technology like artificial intelligence, 3D bioprinting, and robotics that allows us to reduce our reliance on animal testing. I'm especially proud that much of this innovation is happening in my district, Ohio's 11, home to world-class research universities and medical institutions. Not only does this offer the chance to save animals from suffering, these methods can actually lead to better and more accurate results. From a scientific perspective, one of the main issues with animal testing is that these trials often fail to produce results relevant to humans. In fact, 90% of new drugs that are shown to work in animal models fail in human trials. Dr. Locke, one of the witnesses here today, is going to explain this phenomenon, and he said it, and I'll quote, that animal biology is just too different from human biology. Because of this, a great deal of funding and time is wasted on experiments that ultimately do not translate to human trials. By modernizing our research methods to avoid the use of animal subjects, we can also save precious taxpayer dollars. Thankfully, there are viable alternatives that are more ethical, accurate, and efficient ways to study human biology and disease. We now have the technology to effectively replicate organs in labs, allowing us to better see how the human body will respond to drugs and treatments. We have machine learning systems that can analyze large sets of health data to develop predictable models of patient response. We have the capabilities of 3D printing tissue and muscle to test cosmetics, chemicals, and pharmaceuticals in a highly realistic way. Just these few examples highlight the amazing work that has already been done and the important need for continued investment in the medical field. At the time, we must institute strong oversight of the animal testing that is still occurring to ensure that our federal dollars are being used ethically and transparently, and that harm to animals is minimized. I believe it is our moral responsibility to advocate for animals who cannot speak for themselves. Last Congress, I was proud to co-sponsor the Humane Cosmetic Act, which addresses the use of animal testing in the cosmetic industry. This bill had massive bipartisan support, demonstrating the progress we can make in this area. I look forward to hearing more from our witnesses on these important issues, and I look forward to future hearings in the months to come on important topics of cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, and government innovation. Thank you.
Great job. I'm pleased to introduce our witnesses for today's hearing. Our first witness is Mr. Justin Goodman, Senior Vice President, Advocacy and Public Policy at the White Coat Waste Project. It's also Mr. Goodman's birthday today, and so I'd like to wish you a happy birthday and thank you for being here today. Our second witness is Dr. Paul Locke, Professor of the Department of Environmental Health and Engineering at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. Our third witness is Ms. Elizabeth Baker, Director of Research Policy at the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. Welcome, everyone. We're pleased to have you this afternoon. Pursuant to Committee Rule 9G, the witnesses, if you'll please stand and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear to affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record show that the witnesses all answered in the affirmative. We appreciate you for being here today and look forward to your testimony. You may be seated. Let me remind the witnesses that we have read your written statements and they will appear in full in the hearing record. Please limit your oral statements to 5 minutes. As a reminder, please press the button on the microphone in front of you so that it is on when you speak and the members can hear you. When you begin to speak, the light in front of you will turn green. After 4 minutes, the light will turn yellow. And when the red light comes on, your 5 minutes is up. And we would ask that you please wrap it up. I would like to recognize Mr. Goodman to please begin your opening statement.
Style and substance. In the GMC.
Thank you. Chairwoman Mace, Ranking Member Brown, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. As the chairwoman mentioned, it's my birthday, and this is the greatest gift I could possibly ask for. My name is Justin Goodman, and I'm the Senior Vice President of Advocacy and Public Policy at the nonprofit, nonpartisan government watchdog White Coat Waste Project. White Coat Waste has one mission: to stop taxpayers from being forced to pay for cruel, wasteful, inefficient, and dangerous animal experiments in labs around the world. Lab survivors Nellie, Beasley, and Oliver sitting behind me are 3 of the many reasons why. Many people don't realize that the U.S. government is not only the single largest funder of animal testing in the country, but in the world. Uncle Sam outspends the private sector on animal testing 2-to-1. This isn't something to be proud of. Over 20 years ago, the NIH budget doubled and animal testing skyrocketed, but overall, people aren't healthier or living longer. It is estimated that over $20 billion a year of taxpayers' money is still wasted annually on ineffective and inhumane tests on tens of millions of puppies, kittens, and other animals. Am I being flippant when I use the word waste? Absolutely not. The NIH itself has said, quote, "Animal models fail to mimic disease or predict how drugs will work in humans, resulting in much wasted time and money," end quote. Yet agencies continue to dump billions of tax dollars into animal tests despite the horrible return on investment. Experiments we've uncovered range from the savage to the stupid: injecting puppies with cocaine, staging hamster fight clubs, putting dead turtles on treadmills. One of the reasons this problem has gotten so out of control is a stunning lack of innovation, transparency, and accountability. Agencies do not report or even track in some cases how much money is being spent, how many animals are used, what's being done to them, where, and what taxpayers are getting out of it. We file hundreds of FOIA requests every year to glean just basic information. When we can find out how tax dollars are being spent, it becomes apparent why federal agencies fight against disclosing details. For example, Senator Rand Paul's December 2024 Festivus report highlighted cruel taxpayer-funded cat experiments exposed by my organization. In one $10 million DARPA grant, cats have marbles shoved up their rectums and are electroshocked to make them defecate in constipation experiments. We've also recently identified over $240 million in NIH grants for transgender animal experiments, including $26 million in active funding. Some of these tests, as the chairwoman mentioned, examine the effects of party drugs on animals injected with testosterone and how hormones used for human gender transitions impact the size and shape of animals' genitals. How does this translate to helping the average American? Shockingly, 95% of this funding came from Dr. Fauci's NIAID. Speaking of Dr. Fauci, our group is perhaps best known for exposing his and USAID's funding for dangerous gain-of-function animal experiments at the Wuhan lab. We also uncovered his support for cruel beagle tests around the world. Taxpayer-funded animal tests may have caused COVID. Unfortunately, the government hasn't learned its lesson from what happened in Wuhan. Today, there are still 26 animal labs in China, including labs controlled by the Chinese Communist Party and tied to the military, approved to receive NIH funding. This isn't just a misuse of taxpayer dollars, but presents a national security threat. White Coat Waste recently obtained a contract funded by the NIH and DOD that's paying for 300 beagles a week to be restrained and injected with or force-fed experimental drugs in a Chinese lab. The reason they chose beagles like Nellie, Oliver, and Beasley, the contract states, and I quote, "Beagle dogs are docile, cute, and easy to domesticate, so it has been the best choice," end quote. Not because it's effective, but because it's easy. This issue extends beyond China. 344 animal labs in 52 foreign countries are approved currently to receive NIH funding. GAO audits prompted by White Coat Waste have found that NIH shipped billions to foreign animal labs with essentially no oversight, that the NIH has never visited a foreign animal lab in over 40 years of overseeing research, and that some foreign spending isn't even tracked. This is how some spending in Wuhan went undisclosed. And no surprise, Dr. Fauci's division of NIH is responsible for 95% of the foreign aid. Continuing to send tax dollars to an authoritarian adversary's animal labs is a recipe for disaster. With Chairwoman Mace's leadership, we've been able to halt plans for wasteful and cruel testing on dogs and cats and other Fauci-funded labs. These tests have never should have been approved in the first place and were only deemed unnecessary after we exposed them. Our campaigns and legislative work with the chairwoman, Reps Boebert, Khanna, Luna, and many others exposed and shuttered waste like the government's largest cat lab that was feeding kittens kitten meat from Chinese wet markets. Yes, that's true. That was a cannibalism experiment. Eliminating VA testing on dogs and cats and ending nicotine tests on monkeys at the FDA. But there's much more work to be done. Taxpayers shouldn't be forced to pay billions of dollars every year for outdated, cruel, and potentially dangerous animal experiments, especially when most people oppose them. We're excited to work with you, DOGE, the administration, and others to continue cutting wasteful spending on animal experiments. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today on my birthday. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. I recognize Dr. Locke to please begin your opening statement.
Chairwoman Mace, Ranking Member Brown, and members of the committee and subcommittee, thank you for inviting me to offer comments at today's hearing. My name is Paul Locke. I'm a professor in the Department of Environmental Health and Engineering at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. I'm an attorney and an environmental health scientist, and a substantial portion of my work has concentrated on the uses of non-animal methodologies in research and regulatory decision-making, with an emphasis on the promise that these methods have for both reducing animal use and improving evidence-based decision-making.
You are using apple cider vinegar the wrong way. If your goal is to lose belly fat, you need to...
I want to state for the record that the opinions here that I offer are my own, and they do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of the Johns Hopkins University or the Johns Hopkins Health System. Today I want to cover three major points. First, the scientific questions facing us increasingly call into question our reliance on animal models and demand that we move forward with more human-centric science. Second, federal agencies must play a leadership role in this transition to these new human-centric models. And third, the development and deployment of these models represent innovation and places where U.S. businesses and scientists are and must continue to be at the cutting edge. Let's start with a discussion about scientific methods and needs. The complex scientific challenges that we now face require that we move away from traditional animal models and embrace new technologies that do not involve animals but instead incorporate human biology. These technologies include small engineered systems such as organs on a chip and microphysiological systems, or three-dimensional groups of cells such as organoids that mimic many of the important functions of human organs. I would also include AI in this group. Now, while there's considerable enthusiasm around the promise of these new methodologies, unless federal agencies and departments support their development and recognize their promise, they will never be able to reach their full potential. We're not going to be able to replace animals in biomedical research with the meager investments that federal agencies are now making. EPA, FDA, and NIH all have important roles to play in unlocking the potential that these technologies have for designing better drugs, protecting the environment, and improving health. Based on our research, there are currently major gaps in the frameworks needed to support new methodologies, and it's imperative that the federal government step forward. The federal approach has been passive and reactive. What we need is for federal agencies and departments to lead efforts to development, implement, and use these methods. And my written testimony goes into greater information about what federal agencies can be doing, and I hope we'll have some questions on that as well. Finally, the U.S. must continue to lead the way in these technologies so that we are setting the global standards in these fields rather than following other nations. Regulatory agencies worldwide look to us for leadership, and if the U.S. leads in alternatives methods development and validation, our standards will shape international regulations, assist in the creation of U.S. high-tech jobs, and strengthen our national economic growth. So to summarize, scientific advancements have created multiple opportunities for us to develop and deploy more human-centric techniques in toxicology and biomedical research and transition away from animals in biomedical research. Championing these non-animal models is a win-win situation because we can reduce the number of animals used as well as produce data that is more relevant to human health. Federal agencies and departments must play a central role, and they have already begun to do so. However, to realize the full potential that this transition holds, our agencies and departments must do more, including dedicating additional resources and leading in efforts to validate these innovative new technologies. We cannot be world leaders given the meager resources that are now available. These markets are expanding rapidly, and several American companies are well positioned for success in this market space once the regulatory environment and framework is open for them. In closing, I urge the subcommittee to work with federal agencies to further develop the criteria for validation and acceptance of these new technologies within each department and in a coordinated way across multiple agencies, as well as dedicate additional resources to them. Doing so will allow us to reduce the number of animals in research, better inform decision-making, and advance American entrepreneurial science. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Locke. I now recognize Ms. Baker to please begin your opening statement.
Chair Mace and Ranking Member Brown and members of the subcommittee, thank you so much for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Elizabeth Baker at the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. I work with a team of scientists, physicians, lawyers, and other professionals to move medical research, product testing, and advanced medical training away from using animals. I appreciate the subcommittee's attention to this critical subject. Ending federally funded animal experiments is long overdue. For generations, tax dollars have paid scientists to conduct acts that would shock the conscience of most Americans. Dogs, cats, monkeys, rabbits, pigs, and other animals are used in experiments that are painful, stressful, and often lethal for the animals that are subjected to them. Increasingly, it is recognized across research and testing sectors that animals are not good surrogates for humans. Over 85% of Americans that were recently polled agreed that animal-based research should be phased out. Both Congress and the administration must take action to ensure that government funding and requests for animal experiments are stopped, and that instead a portion of that funding is reinvested into more effective human-based approaches. Our first recommendation is to end federal support for wasteful and ineffective animal research. Animal research does not translate to humans because there are insurmountable species differences in our anatomy, physiology, lifespan, disease characteristics, and more. It's known that for new drugs, 9 out of 10 are going to fail in humans after they appeared successful in animals. And paying for those failures is partially why drugs can take so long, over a decade, to develop and cost so much to develop, over $1 billion. Worse, relying on animal data is partially why many human diseases have no treatments and even fewer have cures. Despite this knowledge, the federal government continues to promote animal research. The National Institutes of Health funds 7 national primate research centers that house, breed, and experiment on non-human primates with little regard to actual human translation. While there are countless examples of cruel research, consider this. Since 1991, the NIH has given $15 million to a single heart failure project where dogs are subjected to multiple major surgeries. They have devices that are stabbed into their hearts, and then they're forced to run on treadmills until they die or that device malfunctions. Despite 34 years of this work and hundreds of dead dogs, there's been no benefit to patients. Agencies across the federal government continue to fund animal experiments even when they object to human-based approaches, like animal experiments for human nutrition. Regulatory agencies continue to require animal testing. Congress and the administration can end these wasteful experiments by cutting egregious research, ensuring that research is not funded if these objectives can be studied without using animals, and ending the federal animal testing requirements in regulation and policy. Our second recommendation is to reinvest some of these savings from animal research and testing toward evaluation, acceptance, and use of innovative and more effective human-based approaches. Methods like organs on chips, reconstructed human tissues, sophisticated computer models have existed for some time, but they're only supported at a fraction of the funding that goes to the animal experiments. Some federal efforts have already begun accelerating innovative human-based methods. The NIH has a national center, NICEDM, that works to evaluate and advance non-animal approaches across federal agencies through a congressionally mandated committee, ICFAM. With more investment and an expanded purview, NICEDM can accelerate this work and even address the reproducibility crisis in research. A center at the NIH, NCATS, is already working to bridge the gap between medical research and product development by prioritizing innovative human-based approaches. Recently, the NIH adopted important recommendations on non-animal approaches and launched the complementary program to speed development and use of these methods. Each of these are great examples of steps in the right direction, but the current resource investments just pale in comparison to the stronghold that animal experiments have held for decades. Greater support for these efforts will more quickly advance better science that leads to improved outcomes for people while avoiding animal use. There has been so much recent attention on getting Americans healthier. If we truly want to make America healthy again, we have to make science human again. Thank you so much for this opportunity to testify, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you all for being here today. I will now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questioning. Mr. Goodman, in your written statement, you state the White Coat Waste Project identified at least $10 million in NIH grants for transgender animal experiments. You state that 95% of the funding came from Dr. Fauci's NIAID. Why is the federal government spending taxpayer dollars to create transgender animals?
Once you try a comfort hoodie, you can't go back to regular hoodies. They're slightly weighted, super oversized. It's that perfect fit that makes you feel like you're wrapped in a blanket, but you get to look like you have your life together at the same exact time. And when I tell you they have every color you could think of, from neutrals, vibrant colors, they have zip-ups, you guys, if that's more your vibe. They even have dog hoodies that you can match with your dogs. They have the sweatpants with the cuffs, but also the sweatpants with the wide leg. Just look at how much higher quality and thicker these are than your average sweatpant. I also love love that this brand supports mental health. Once you try one on, you will literally never want to take it off. It will be your road trip hoodie, your airport hoodie, your bonfire hoodie, your coffee shop hoodie, I'm telling you. And a moment for this hood, like it's so big and flattering. The inside feels like heaven on your skin. The waistbands are so thick and stretchy without any hard wiring in here, so they're never digging into your stomach. If you don't like the ones with the logo on it, don't worry, they have the standard collection that has no logos. These things have blown up on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, you name it. Like, I see a comfort hoodie every time I leave my house. Even the big celebs are wearing them right now, which is why they're always sold out. So if you want to make sure you get your size, I would not wait. I am 5'2", and I'm wearing a medium in this.
Great question.
Your microphone.
Thank you. It's a great question. I mean, I wonder why they're making cats constipated also. It's a question that rings around in my head at night when I'm going to bed, why we're funding these things. A lot of the programs that are funded do latch on to some type of social trend, and then animal experimenters use it as a money grab, as an excuse to get NIH tax funds from some, in this case, DEI grants were used to fund a lot of this stuff. So people who abuse animals find some kind of excuse to bring in new money, and they'll switch their research program over to something that's trendy to bring tax dollars into their university. I mean, that's part of the big problem here, is that colleges and universities are taking 25 to 40% off the top of every single one of these grants for indirect costs that go into a slush fund that has nothing to do with the research. So they're willing to let experimenters do whatever they want to animals to keep the money flowing in.
Some people might describe that as money laundering. All right, are sex change experiments that forcibly transition mice, rats, and monkeys necessary for science?
Absolutely not.
Why do these experiments at all, if they aren't producing useful human relevant research, why again, you think it's a money issue, follow the money?
Animal testing is big business.
As you know, I've been long vocal about animal experiments and federal funded animal testing, and worked with you to prevent Fauci's plan to waste almost $2 million in taxpayer dollars to maim and murder beagle puppies, for example. Why was Dr. Fauci so insistent on poisoning these puppies, even though, as you state in your written statement, the FDA does not mandate that human drugs be studied on dogs?
So much of the problem with all of this is institutional inertia. It's that people just continue doing the same thing because that's what they've done before. There was a report that came out the National Academy of Sciences put out a few years ago about the VA's testing on dogs that Congressman Khanna actually helped us get the NAS to conduct. And they found that most of the VA's testing on dogs was unnecessary. And not only that it was unnecessary, but one of the reasons why is that there's this circular reasoning that they use to defend it when they propose a new project. They say, well, we used dogs previously, so we're just going to use dogs again. And there's no one to break that cycle. There's not enough oversight to say, hey, maybe we don't need to do this anymore. Maybe there's a better way to do it. It's like, if you only have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, and that's kind of the problem.
Right. And what would have happened to these beagle puppies if your organization hadn't rescued them?
In the case of those experiments, those dogs were going to be force-fed and injected with massive doses of experimental drugs to poison them to see at what point they got sick or died. And those tests will have no relevance for the safety and efficacy of that drug in human beings.
Thank you. Dr. Locke, I have a few questions for you. Can the scientific challenges we face today be solved by relying on animal testing?
No, not all of them.
Can you briefly describe how new technologies can allow us to transition away from animal testing without hindering scientific research?
Certainly. I also want to point out that in my written testimony, I do try to lay out a roadmap for how that could happen. But basically what we need to do is we need to spend a lot more resources supporting these non-animal technologies, such as organs on a chip and organoids, so we can use those to study many of the phenomena that we're now studying in animals.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Baker, what are your thoughts today, reading your testimony for the opportunity to testify that it's long overdue? Where do we go from here? How do we fix the problem?
I think we fix the problem by investing in what is going right. We've got to cut a lot of this terrible animal research. We need to cut the National Primate Research Centers. We are funding these centers to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars every year. We've got to stop funding animal experiments outside the United States, as Mr. Goodman says, that have no oversight. We've got to stop. If you can meet your objectives without using animals, there's absolutely no reason that you should. And so
And I was going to say, thank you for bringing it up, the amount of money, the hundreds of millions. I recently found out in the state of South Carolina, in my district, there's a primate breeding center and testing site, Alpha Genesis. They've made, to my understanding, over $100 million from NIH over the last 20 or so years. This is a boondoggle. It is a racket. And hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars, in fact, have been wasted on it. So I want to thank you all for your testimony today. Thank you for being here. I would now like to recognize my colleague, Ms. Brown, for 5 minutes.
Again, thank you to our witnesses for being here. I think it's clear that we all agree that we do not want to see animals harmed, and that there is work to be done to reduce our reliance on animals for medical and scientific research. So I'd like to start with you, Ms. Baker. Can you talk about where you think some of the current gaps in the oversight of animal are in the animal experimentation?
Yeah, I think we have some major issues with oversight. We don't know really how much spending is going to animal experiments. The public is largely in the dark. We try so hard to understand this information, and we have to come up with some of it on our own. It would be great if the federal government would be more transparent in this way. We do know that in 2016, the NIH said that for fiscal year 2015, 47% of extramural grants used mice. $7.4 billion is what that would be in 2024. In 2021, NIH issued a figure that said about 8% of grants go to non-clinical, non-animal approaches. Well, non-clinical approaches really mean the animal tests or some of these, or the alternatives. And so a ton of money is going into this. We wanted to understand for cancer. Cancer is one disease area where it is well known that animals are just really poor predictors of human outcomes. We get cancer differently. It behaves differently in our bodies. The failure rate for cancer drugs is 94%. We have cures for cancer in mice. We don't in humans. And so we wanted to look at what is the National Cancer Institute doing? How are they funding? What does their funding look like? And so our analysis is not perfect because it's based on, unfortunately, just the publicly available information, which is not totally transparent. But we found that 45% of their grants seem to be animal related. And so the NIH can really, I think, help by ensuring that there is transparency around this. There's also an oversight issue when it
going to reclaim because I'd like to get to Dr. Locke too, but thank you. Dr. Locke, you talked in your testimony about several different technologies that you've worked with that are direct alternatives to animal testing. Can you speak to the success of these technologies and what Congress can do to be more supportive of the efforts to expand other innovative technologies in this space?
Yes, thank you for your question. I think there are at least two things that Congress can do. The first thing Congress can do is to really get a handle, as my colleagues have said, on how much money we're spending on these technologies. The transparency issue is severe. So since this is a committee on accountability, I would say the first thing we need to do is we need to count. We don't have that information. You don't have that information. The second thing that needs to be done is that these technologies need to be what I would call validated. And by that I mean they need to be shown that they're relevant and reliable for a particular purpose. One of my frustrations now is that the federal agencies are not doing that. They seem to be very reactive, and they seem to want folks who are in the field to bring the data to them, and then they're going to make the decision, well, we accept this data or don't accept this data. That's a really bad situation to be in. These folks who are developing the methods are entrepreneurs, they're innovators. They have to know what kind of target they're shooting at. The third thing I would say is that we really do need to get a handle on the animal research we're doing. Again, that's an area of transparency. And we need to develop metrics so we can figure out what part of that research is actually working and what part is not working. And then, as my colleagues have suggested, I think we should be sunsetting the stuff that's not working and reinvesting that in these new methodologies.
Thank you very much, Dr. Locke. And as we move to decrease our reliance on animal experimentation, it's important to acknowledge that unfortunately there are still companies and organizations that still utilize animal testing. So what can be done to move these places toward alternative models like the ones you have mentioned?
Hey there. Have you ever thought about how powerful it would be if all of your tools were custom connected?
Thank you for that question. I think there's several things that can be done. The first thing we can do, and I have some bias here as an academic, is we can train our students in these new methods. We have to move away from animal tests, and animal research is always the gold standard. The second thing we can do is we can energize the whole federal grant system to make it much more friendly so that folks who want to use these alternatives can actually go out and get research money to study them.
All right, thank you. And with that, Madam Chair, I yield back.
Okay, thank you. I will now yield to Ms. Boebert for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate your advocacy on this and protecting so many animals against this, as we've heard, savage research that has been taking place not only in the United States, but all throughout the world. And I want to thank our witnesses today for your boldness to come out, because it seems like anytime we expose millions and billions even of dollars that are spent towards ridiculous research programs or just organizations themselves, we are lashed out at, we're called crazy and conspiracists. And I want to thank you so much for taking a bold step. I want to thank you for the White Coat Waste Project, because this is not only saving precious beagles' lives, but really exposing to the American taxpayer where their money is going. And I think we all want to be good stewards of our tax money. We are responsible for those tax dollars here in Congress, and it's our responsibility to be stewards and overseers of that. So I'm grateful for DOGE to come in alongside of us to help expose some of this and kind of get those wheels turning. But just for the folks back home real quick before I get into my questions, I want to just highlight 1 million seconds is 11 and a half days. 1 billion seconds is 31 years and 7 months. It's like this is a huge difference. So when we're talking about billions of dollars going towards the cruelty of animals, it is much larger than what it sounds, because it's been so watered down to hear that Congress is spending millions or billions or even trillions of dollars. God forbid if we find out what comes after a trillion, we'll start spending that too. But Mr. Goodman, since 1998, how much do you believe that the federal government has spent on animal cruelty testing?
Thank you for the question. That's, as we've been discussing, it's tough because there's not a lot of transparency about actually how much tax dollars are being spent. I would say we're probably looking at $1 trillion in spending by NIH since '98, and if about 47% of that is used for experiments on animals, $500 billion could have potentially been spent on animal testing since 1998.
That is an extreme number. Thank you for that. And Mr. Goodman, how much money do you think that NIAID wasted on unethical and useless and abusive testing? I would imagine it's about the same, because none of this has been very useful or effective.
Yeah, so Dr. Fauci ran NIAID from 1984 to 2022, and when he left at the end of 2022, it had a $6.5 billion budget. Again, we don't know what percentage of that was for animal testing, but probably higher than the average across NIH. And I just want to make a note here that Dr. Fauci, and I don't have any issue with him outside of his abuse of animals, he was not just a paper pusher. He was personally involved in animal experimentation, experimenting on monkeys, giving them HIV-like viruses until the day he left NIH. He was the lead investigator on grants that were funded by taxpayers to do that. And he started his career by infecting chimpanzees with HIV and promising we were going to have an AIDS vaccine back in the 80s, which we never got because, as you mentioned, they don't get HIV, they don't get AIDS, they don't get sick. So there's been an enormous amount of waste and abuse, and his legacy, unfortunately, he's gone from government, but his legacy at NIAID lives on.
Yes, fortunately, he has gone from government, but that doesn't prevent us from holding him accountable for not only the wasteful spending, but the cruel tests that have taken place over the years. So maybe you answered my next question. How many of these treatments have found cures in humans that come from this cruel kind of testing?
Well, virtually none. We've heard the statistics today, and any that have come, it's out of pure dumb luck, and they're the exception, not the rule, because animal experiments are a dead end. It's pure chance if something good comes out of it.
And so I'm seeing here with NIAID, the budget of spending of $6.5 billion in taxpayer money. It's been used to pay EcoHealth Alliance to import hundreds of Asian bats into the U.S. for new viruses in labs in Colorado run by the Wuhan-linked researchers. That's $6.7 billion for the Colorado State University in Fort Collins to research bats here in America. And we've also sent billions of taxpayer dollars to unaccountable labs in China and other foreign countries implant aborted baby parts into lab animals. Have you heard of that sort of research?
Yeah, we did an analysis a few years ago showing that over 90% of experiments with using human fetal tissue and putting them involved animals were funded by Fauci's NIAID.
Do you know where they're getting the aborted human fetal tissue?
A lot of it is happening at colleges and universities that have affiliated hospitals that perform that procedure.
Madam Chair, I think we need to look into that as well. My time has expired. I apologize to our other witnesses. I did have questions for you, but I'll submit those in writing. Thank you.
That's wild. I would now like to recognize Mr. Subramaniam for 5 minutes questioning.
Thank you. I'm glad we're having this hearing today. I actually had the chance to talk to an animal care program manager at a research facility, and he said something really interesting. He said the day we no longer need animals for research is the day we've succeeded as an industry. So I think what you're finding is that even the people who are employed to run these programs are starting to realize that we'd like to see a path to where we no longer need animals. And so I think that's really interesting. One of the things I would like to know, though, is how far away are we until the technologies can completely replace animals and we can still be on the cutting edge of science? You know, I'm an animal lover, I'm a vegan even. I very much support getting rid of animals in all testing, but I want to make sure that we also, do the cutting edge research that we need to do. I'd ask all three, really, Ms. Baker, Dr. Locke, Mr. Goodman, if you could address how far away are we? And I also would love to know what kind of investment do we need? Does it have to be from the public sector? Is there, private sector, companies going after this, getting venture funding for it, for instance? I'd love to know, what we could do, what the path looks like.
The stock market is open for nearly 7 hours a day, but don't even think about trading it after.
Thank you for the question. There are so many incredible technologies that we have today that we should be using to be on the cutting edge. So, using animals is not cutting edge. Using animals is something that has been done for so long. The innovative approaches don't use animals. They are human biology based because we need to understand human outcomes. If we want to talk about innovation, if you look to just take a look at any other industry. Look at the phone industry. What was a phone in the 1950s versus what it is today? What was a car back then versus what it is today? What is science doing back then? What was science doing back then versus what is happening today? A lot of the regulatory tests that are done are the same exact tests that have been done since the 1950s. So if we're talking about really being on the cutting edge, we absolutely have to be embracing and supporting and investing in these approaches. It's not just our federal government. There are many companies that exist today that have already developed these approaches. I think they will do much better once we do things like remove requirements for testing products on animals, because there still is so much favoritism in science for using the animal-based approaches, because people think that you have to do it if you want to get an NIH grant, you have to do it if you want to get through the FDA. And so once those things really start to change, I think we'll see a lot more investment in the government and outside.
And Dr. Locke, the same question.
Yes, thank you for the question. The good news is that, at least in one area, cosmetics testing, we are pretty much out of the animal testing business. If you look at other areas, for example, testing of environmental chemicals, drugs, and discovery, we're not there yet. How long is it going to take? I always like to say it's not a matter of if, but it's a matter of when. But no one's ever asked me to put a time on that, and I'm afraid I can't do that. I know what steps we need to take to get there, which are to really start to fund these technologies, to make sure that these technologies are valid, to get the federal government to really be very, very much of a leader in these. I do believe that we have an incredibly entrepreneurial private sector that is well positioned to be leaders in these in the world market. You're seeing all sorts of continuous funding of these from venture capitalists. You're seeing all sorts of use of these technologies in medical